Yes.
I'd like to call the Plan Commission meeting to order on Tuesday, July 25th, 2023 at 5:30 PM. Janelle, can you please take roll call?
Bertle,
Here.
Chample,
Here.
Bell,
Here.
Schmitz,
Here.
and Kane.
Here.
Gretzmacher is excused.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Bell,
Second.
second by Kane. All those in favor respond with an eye. Opposed, carried. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 27th, 2023 as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Schmitz. Second by Shampo. All those in favor respond with an eye.
All right.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carried. Comments and correspondence, Janelle,
I don't have anything.
other than what's in our packet?
Yeah,
Okay,
Can I just make a comment on what's in the package?
Sure.
So, just for the public too, there is a session on August 17th at 3 PM at the Village Hall. That's gonna be presented by the Wisconsin Historical Society. They're gonna be commenting on our local historic preservation ordinance, as well as some other education, so if Plan Commission members can make it, I think it's a good thing if you can be there. I'll be there, but, the more the merrier. I think the more education we have, the better on that.
work.
Yeah.
We'll be there. Is there anybody in our audience of two tonight that would like to address the Planning Commission on anything? Agenda item 6A, public hearing, ordinance number X, moratorium telecommunication towers. Julie?
So, at last month's meeting, the Plan Commission decided to have, proposed a moratorium on the erection of tall telecommunication towers. So it would be a 6-month moratorium to give us time to work on some regulations. Exempt from that would be personal communication towers, and those below 35 feet. I'm sorry, private towers less than 35 feet. So even if they're public, they'd still be required, subject to the moratorium, but the private use ones under 35 feet would be exempt.
Okay, at 5:32, I will open the public hearing. And is there anyone here that would like to speak for or against the moratorium in the ordinance that has been published? Let the record show that there is not. I will close the public hearing at 5:33. Board discussion?
I'm not convinced we need this, but I don't think it's gonna matter at all anyway. I don't think it's gonna have any impact, so. There's nothing to object to there, but
Right.
it's not gonna keep anything from happening.
Then does somebody care to make a motion to recommend this ordinance to the village board at their next meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Kane,
Second.
second by Shampo. All those in favor respond with an eye. Opposed. Carried. Agenda 7A, draft sidewalk policy.
So, we've been talking about this for several months. What I did was, all of the amendments we've discussed are in red. The ones we added in June are in red and underlined. So, the only thing I added was on the very last page, which would be page 18 of the packet. You'll see some asterisks. And I just added 2 things that we should be aware of and discuss if we're not happy with it. And that is on page 17. I added the word, it says every development shall provide and maintain a public sidewalk with a minimum width of, it said 6 feet. And I changed that to 5 because 5 is what we're using everywhere else in these documents. So I thought it should be consistent. And then it also talks about how, across the front of the parcel in a side yard abutting a public street, an additional 14 feet of landscaping should be required. And elsewhere in the documents, we proposed 3, and there was even comments that maybe in some situations that may be too much. So that 3 was added to make it consistent as well. But that we have not discussed. Those were just 2 things I picked up when I was going through the final version. So if we might want to talk about those as well. if the committee, since we've talked about this quite a bit, whatever we decide today, I think we're probably ready to go to public hearing on it. If the committee's okay with that.
So on page 15. Under item 17, and you have referenced this in, in the past. I don't know if we've actually added the word waived into any of our text amendments. But that, I understand what it is. I don't particularly care for the word. That just means by a general vote, you know, we're not gonna make you adhere to the zoning code. I didn't have time to look it up, but I know that there are places currently where the verbiage is in our current code that if there's a 3/4 majority vote, we can.
Override, I think is the.
I don't
Oh,
override.
it's on the,
There's something in the density. In R2, when you're looking at
I
density,
think there's also one on the side setbacks, but I'm not sure.
You think there's some density?
in R200 density. It requires a 3/4 vote. Because we just went through that with Garrett Bader.
Oh, I don't have the new version.
Let me see if I can find it real quick, Denise. if you don't mind.
Oh, right here. The maximum, okay. The maximum dwelling unit density shall be 6 units per acre. The plan commission may modify the density standard by a 3/4 majority votes. We're modifying the standard.
Okay.
I just
Consistent.
Okay,
like that
Yep.
better, and I think if we already have that verbiage in here, we're consistent. Okay.
okay, so I would, that'd be, I would just change that on the final version that
Sure.
goes to. public hearing.
I've got something later on in that sentence.
Sure.
Due to unique topographical features, does that limit us to only being able to modify that due to topographical features? Or, I mean, I guess I would rather leave that vague at the time and commission's discretion if we can.
Just drop
On a case
the,
by case basis, period.
I see waived is further down too, which,
Yes,
I'll do a search on the word waive,
okay.
and wherever it says waived, we'll change that.
Okay.
We're going to be modified with the 3/4 vote.
And then on page 16. Where it says in red sidewalk, an at-grade hard surface, typically concrete, intended for use by pedestrians. And is physically separated from the roadway by a curb or unpaved buffered space. So my question is, what we have downtown. Do you consider that is, there's a curb there, so that's okay? Because I was just wondering if this was always true.
I think it is, because you're either gonna have a curb or a grass strip or a planting strip. On roads where, let's say there's no curb, you're not gonna have where you have asphalt and then a sidewalk right away,
Okay.
or you're not gonna have asphalt gravel sidewalk. We just don't have any, and I don't think we would have ever installed, I don't think we ever would install anything like that, because that's just dangerous.
Right. Okay.
So,
Not to mention, you'd also have to build that sidewalk up to road standard, so it would drive the cost up prohibitively.
yeah,
Okay. Those were the only comments that I had, otherwise I thought it looked good. Anybody else?
good.
Are you searching for something?
Yeah, there was something that I'm trying to, it was something along the lines of when delineate the path through.
Property?
Yeah, property and commercial. And I'm trying to find the exact wording in here. But I think that it was saying that we could delineate it with paint. On the long lines or markings, you find markings, but you know that was in there. It wasn't.
I don't remember reading that, but that doesn't mean anything.
No, I went back through it there, it's what that was in there, but I'm not seeing it now.
It might be in the land division.
That's where it was, okay, wrong one.
Okay,
So if everyone's okay with that, we could send that to public hearing next month.
okay, is there a motion to do that?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Bell,
Second.
second by Kane. All those in favor respond with an eye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. 7B, draft miscellaneous amendments to chapter 54 land division code.
So. We got a lot here to go through. As you know, most of the stuff in here is cleanup. The big thing we wanted to talk about, I think, was, those items I had mentioned in the staff report, but primarily the cluster development, I think, is the concern.
Yeah.
Or to make sure we're all on board with that. And then, as you read in the memo, I also had Tasha. I sent Tasha the ordinance before to update the fee, to make sure the fee part was consistent with statute, revised statute. And she did get back to me, so I changed that too, but there's really, in my mind, no discussion on that. Statutes are what they are. We can't change that, so I don't really think we need to look at that part. I think we really need to focus on the cluster development part. Before we go further.
Before we get there, on page 6, not of the packet, but of the code. Line 41. Structures deemed substantially complete. Substantially is one of those words that scares me.
Okay,
Now, it might be common, but it just stuck out at me.
yeah, I think, boy, it's been so long since I worked on this. That's actually defined by statute. Substantially complete is. And it might be elsewhere in here, but let me check on that, David, okay?
Okay.
And if not, add that definition.
Yeah,
There's certain areas where the statutes define that. And if it's not in here, or if there's not a reference, I'll add that.
and then quickly, the next page. Line 12.
That under cluster subdivisions?
Oh, yeah, it was, yeah,
Yep, that's where we're going to be starting now.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead, line 12.
The word all, are we really want clusters in all residential zoning districts?
Yeah. I don't know that we do. I also have that highlighted.
I think we circle back to that after we polish up the rest of it, so we can understand how it's going to apply, because it may depend on. What survives our first go through.
Good point.
All right.
Would it help? At the next meeting, if I have samples or examples for you to see on a screen what that looks like? The clustering,
Yes. Yeah, I can think about
we don't have the software to do it like an engineer would, but I can do it close enough that you're gonna get the grasp of it. But, I had presented some to the board in December. So I think if we look at that, it'll help people understand kind of how that clustering works.
Yeah, the house that I used to have in Mequon, we were doing a lot of because we were at 1 acre minimum and then 2 acre minimum community, and they were doing a lot of clustering.
And you make sure you put, when you put that, if you're gonna put that in the packet, make sure it says example only on there, because I could see somebody going through the packet, looking at that, say, oh, you're planning on doing this?
I probably won't do the backup, I'll just do it.
Perfect.
Because I'm guessing this will take me until the last minute, to put it together.
Okay.
So starting on line 15, lot sizes and density. Lots do not need to meet the minimum lot width and area standards specified in the zoning ordinance. So I wrote define, that to me means we're going against the code.
No, what you're trying to do is, so if they met the minimum lot with an area, why would you be clustering? them? You know, because a developer, if you required him, think of a 40-acre parcel. And each lot had to be 1 acre. If you were gonna require them all to meet that 1 acre, you just make 41-acre lots. There would be no incentive to make them smaller, so. What you do is you allow them to be smaller so they can get them in a corner. So the rest of it can be preserved.
But that's why I think it needs to, either we need to put a couple of more sentences in there.
Okay.
So that it's very clear that
So,
whatever the criteria is, they still need, the lot size may not have to be that, but the subdivision has to meet that requirement.
and or do we just use the word modify up in sidewalks, that we could modify the width dimensions? Or is that too much?
I think because specifically, you still have to have the land for all the units that you're gonna put on. So I think if we add that,
Okay,
to me, that makes the most sense.
So as long as the underlying density is maintained.
For the subdivision, yeah.
I'll work.
I
on
won't
that.
get into the weeds on what the exact word.
I'll work on it. I think,
Just at a high level, are we more concerned with density or green space?
well. If you're looking at how many lots can be created there, that's density, right? That's if I have a 40-acre and each lot has to be 1 acre, my density is 1 unit per acre. So if your density is, so I would allow him to. That means he could still have those 41 acre lots, but I'm gonna allow him to have them on much smaller lots. As long as that density is still at least 40. And then, of course, if he gets these incentives, he can increase that and have more homes. He still has to maintain that density of 40 homes for 1 home per acre.
He still has to have 40 acres.
If he has 40 acres,
If he wants to put up 40 homes, the density is 1 per acre. He has to have 40 acres
for that,
for that, but how he clusters them would be up to them, to the developer, with everything else then being open space.
right,
Right,
he could still have the 40 homes.
so that's what I'm saying, that it's the subdivision lot size that remains true. It's just then, it's not the lot size,
It's the density.
it's the density holds true, but he still needs the 40 acres.
Correct.
Does the density always stay the same? I mean,
No.
if you give him the incentives, then he gets more,
Right.
Right.
yes.
But the density would be different based on the zoning district he's in, right? So if you're in a zoning district that is, let's say it's 10,000 square feet. The density is, make it easy, 1 per 10,000 square feet. Versus if you're in a zone where it's 20,000 square feet, the density is 1 per 20,000 square feet. So. Regardless of the amount of land he has, his density has to stay at that. At a minimum. And then if he clusters, he's gonna be able to add or increase that density. He's gonna be able to add more lots.
So if I'm thinking about the Wiltie property when we're talking about this. So the mechanism we'd want to have there, we'd want to specify the density be greater in that zoning district. If we so chose to, letting this apply to all the districts.
Right, and it would, because your density, if I remember right, the intent was we want to zone that R4.
Yep.
Which I think is 7,500 square feet,
45,
4,500 square.
real small.
So that's good to hear. So I don't know where that's 7,500, but so your density is. Regardless of how much land you have, you have to have 4,500 square feet dedicated towards each house. That doesn't mean the lot has to be 4,500, but so if I wanted, I don't have a calculator, but let's say I wanted to put 20 homes out there. Whatever 20 times 4,500 is, that's how much land I have to have to even start. And then I can increase the homes.
It can grow from there.
Right,
So we're gonna just change the width standards, but we are not changing the setbacks. So even though they're gonna get a lot more houses there, there's still gonna be the whatever it is, 10 and 10 or 8 and 8, whatever it is,
that's right, because we still have to maintain, we don't wanna have overcrowding.
right?
And we have to look out for things such as fire safety.
Mhm.
So we still have to maintain that.
Okay.
And you don't want to be right on top of any neighbors.
Well, you're going to be in. At 8 and 8, you're on top. By my standards.
If we want affordable housing, there's gonna have to be some sort of, on top of the neighborhood.
No, but not neighbors within the subdivision, property neighbors that may be a different zoning district.
Oh,
Whatever is
yeah,
what I was implying.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
Adjoining property, I think that might be. there.
yes, yeah, that's what I meant, sorry. And
So,
go ahead.
well, then, I was doing the math and I don't understand this, but I saw a developer ending up putting a parking lot in because I added up all of these. Now, are these, so you get 15%, if it's a public sidewalk, you get 10, and I mean, how does that apply? Because I saw this 40% just get eaten up real quick.
If it's okay with you, I'm gonna go back to the board. I'm gonna start drawing on there. Would that help?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it is here.
Oh, yeah.
Because of my turning around.
I can still do that, so.
That draw.
You want me to help you move that table?
Yeah, just move down a little.
Well, let's just pull it out.
Yeah, I could see if someone. Hit. All of the percentages that you give them. What would you have left?
Actually, we would owe them space.
That's right. That's what I figured also.
27, 37, it was over 40. Yeah.
I think it's, and that's something to talk about. How much do you want to give as an incentive?
I mean, yeah, where do you stop with the incentives?
Yeah,
I think the numbers are there, it's just Julie had to have a starting point to say this is what we have, and now we can work backwards.
Up
from-
to, but.
Yeah.
and maybe there's a maximum number of incentives you get. So just real quick, as an example.
This is why when I taught, I brought my own markers.
Instead of looking for.
Yeah, I brought a whole bunch of mine here a couple of months ago and put them out here, but I never used it for.
Convinced my faculty that they don't reload if you just put them back on the shelf.
Blue, black, green.
Sorry.
So we see what I'm meeting.
Okay, so. What you have is I'm gonna do 40 acres, okay? Just because it's easier to explain it this way. So I have 40 acres. And let's say my minimum lot size is 5 acres, okay? I know that's more, but it's easier. So that means I can have 8 lots, right? That's a traditional development. But under clustering. I'm just looking at the density, I can have 8 lots, right? So here we got. Beautiful woods. It's nice for bringing out these nice colors, and I got a big pond.
Breathe and water.
Yeah. So instead of having it like that, I'm gonna let them go like. Like this maybe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe it's like that. So now I ignored the lot within area requirements in order to preserve the woods and the wetland. It's also more attractive development too.
Less infrastructure.
Yep, now I'm not running roads through all, I'm just, going up here on this part of the property. Less infrastructure, lots are more affordable, I preserve stuff. So let's start working through the incentives, okay? So, green space, the green space requirements, maybe, here we go with waived again. Maybe in this code, we can use waived. Maybe, or I'll do a search on. In exchange for the equivalent amount of land being preserved and restricted to future development. For example, if the zoning ordinance requires lot to have 40% of the lot left as green space, there shall not be a green space restriction on the individual proposed lots, but at least 40% of the development must be green and void of lots. So what that means, you guys, is here, let's assume 40% of the lot had to be green. I'm not going to require 40% of these to be green, but 40% of this has to be green. The end result is I'm actually preserving a bigger, it's not fragmented. I'm not getting fragmented green space. I'm getting larger quantities of unfragmented green space. Better for habitat, things of that. Okay. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay.
So for our purposes, this is ties back to this green space. We've defined green space elsewhere.
And I'm sorry, I always mess this up. Our code calls it open space.
When we did the moratorium last year, we changed green space to open space.
So what I think that we should avoid including in that is turf grass. Because it's effectively developed area.
Okay, yeah. So just to finish example 2. Obviously, there will still be a road going through there, so that takes away open space.
Hold on, just a second.
Yeah.
Open space, not green. Let's call it open space, not green space. And no turf, the no turf, what I think should actually go. Yeah, I don't know.
That might go elsewhere.
It is a different code. Okay, what was that?
So now, I just want to make sure that we're, besides the 8 lots there, we also are going to put a road in, so the road does count against the open space.
Correct.
All right.
Yep,
All right, so now they put in a public sidewalk and you're going to give them a 15% bonus.
okay. So number 4. Density as an incentive to conserve, let me just keep going down real quick, Dave.
Okay.
Density as an incentive to conserve land and develop more cost effectively. The density of a lot may be increased for the incentives, okay? So we have 8 to start with. Clustering. In order to take advantage of the smaller lot within area and incentives in the following subsections, at least 90% of the lots in the development shall be clustered. The reason why I have it that way is maybe John Wealthy wants to keep a big 5-acre McMansion lot over here. So we're saying,
Yay.
so we're saying at least 90% of them must be clustered to take advantage of it. We can change that to say they all have to be clustered.
Well, but it also could, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I don't like your scenario. But because of topography or whatever, you could still have down in that corner by the pond, there could be 2 there because for whatever reason, maybe too many trees would have to come down. So I think that we should be able to, so I don't mind the 90.
Yeah, maybe this is
Right.
maybe this is actually the best spot on that lot. So you would allow him to have. You wouldn't penalize him for retaining a nice chunk right there.
90%
of it gets clustered. What?
as long as it doesn't drive up the infrastructure cost, because when you have them floating out there on their own. You know, if all of a sudden we've got to run sewer and water out there, and it's not just that, and road, it's not just the cost of installing it, what really gets you is the cost of maintaining it for years. So I think that is the 90%, as long as we're not driving up our infrastructure. costs.
Well, keep in mind, yes, we're maintaining it, but keep in mind, they're paying for it.
Yeah, but that's, the installation cost isn't what gets us. I mean, like, if you look at America now, what's really getting people is they subsidize sewer and road that got put in it, they got a check from the state or the Fed, and now they're having to maintain it for all these years. So I get that they're gonna have to pay for that, but at the same point, we're gonna ultimately pay maintenance on it. So I still think that it's important to make sure that it's beneficial to our infrastructure.
So that could be a caveat.
Yeah. and-
We'll go with the 90% unless,
Unless it doesn't, like, unless it drives up the infrastructure expense, however we can word that.
You know, and in reviewing it, maybe we say, okay, so here's. And we're like, no way, we're, you know, to run it all the way over here, no way. So maybe we say, you've gotta have. Like this. Instead.
Or let's just say that there's something across the street from that corner, and then that's not an issue, then it wouldn't matter. But if it's floating out there on an island on its own, so that's where it is. And I don't know how we can get code that's gonna reflect that.
I don't know if you can, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think most people are gonna go to maximize the number of lots they can. They're gonna wanna go with like 100% cluster, majority of them. I don't know if we can write code to address every situation. And I think we're gonna learn as we go on this one.
I guess, I think that we should start out with 100 and see how it goes, and if we need to modify it, we can later on. Because again, that's it, the infrastructure is the reason why I think that is because gosh, I cannot think of a reasonable way to write code to say, as long as you don't make the infrastructure obscenely expensive, it's not quantifiable, it's not something you can put into code.
But Nate, what if you can't cluster 100%? What if this is such, what if this is like this?
Yeah, because I'm thinking of, so I mean, the easy thought right now, thinking about what Wilsey looks like. There's very little, I think, topographical issues out there. But if we go back to gentleman who was here a couple weeks ago, that was a classic lot that to cluster it would have made sense.
Yeah.
Well, I know there were other issues, but
see, I look at it not the developer having his McMansion, but maybe there's, if you're talking about 90% of it, and what if there's two clusters because of the topography? If somebody would come in and say, well, we have to remove all of these trees to get the cluster, instead of having two clusters of maybe it's 4 each, and then we can save all of this, that's still not 90%. But then you could maybe use that verbiage that we just talked about, where with a 3/4 majority vote, you don't have to meet that 80 because they're still clustering. It just happens now to be in two different places, and we'd still have to approve.
That could make sense, I guess, and just in that specific scenario, why wouldn't somebody split those into two separate, areas and say this is a cluster and this is a cluster?
Well, because then you'd have to have a new survey done. It would cost you money to do that.
Okay.
Is one reason.
Well, I mean, ultimately, to make these things affordable, every time we put an
Right.
expense on it,
Right.
we're driving up the cost, so
Right.
that,
So if we use the caveat, then the 3/4 majority vote, you don't have to do that 90, but again, we'd have to approve if it's clustered in two areas and not just one. Because that's more of what I possibly see happening. I don't know that the McMansion guy wants to, live there. It's not saying somebody wouldn't, but.
You just brought up a good thing, and I just added that perhaps these need approval, 3/4 vote approval, since you're waiving a lot here. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so for clustering, it's 9. natural features, if there's a natural feature.
What line are you on, Julie?
I'm,
61.
Thank
line
you.
61.
Okay,
If there's a natural feature to preserve it into perpetuity, and that's the thing, you require them to go into perpetuity. So years down the line, somebody doesn't now try and split it again, or fill it in, or cut it down. The subdivider is allowed to increase the density of the development by 10%. Okay, so, I'm gonna preserve that wetland, and I could have 8 lots. And I just gained 0.8. Okay, I'm gonna preserve the wetlands, so I just gained 0.8 lot.
but we don't round down, we round, right?
We're
We
gonna-
don't round up,
We're gonna total it
right?
and round
Okay.
up. So it's 0.8. Now, I want him to put in, public sidewalks. Like that, okay, and I'm just gonna get 15, so. Here comes my hard part. Okay, teacher, 15% of 8 lots,
That's what we're
that is.
What, 1.2,
1.2.
right?
I know better than.
1.2. I can tell you run a business.
No, I'm just really good at math in my head.
Yeah. 1.2. And if the trails are not multimodal and solely for hiking, density can be increased by 7.5. Okay, we're just gonna pretend for our sake of argument, it was multimodal. And so he got the 1.2.
I don't think the snowmobile belongs in there because snowmobiles, I mean, like, sure, it's fun, but it's a recreation. It's not a usable form of transportation on a year-round basis.
But I think
And
that,
they wouldn't want it
Yeah,
kept clean. They want the snow pile up to
yeah. So
operate.
if you're gonna have other users on there, it's not compatible with other users.
but I think that's up to the plan commission when they're reviewing it, because let's just say, for example. That trail, let's say the snowmobile trail just ran like this.
I don't wanna give, there's no good reason to give a density bonus for snowmobile trail. I don't understand why we wanna do that. I'm not saying we prohibit it, but
Because the snowmobile club can ask any property owner for access, and it doesn't have to be a legit, other multi-purpose trail.
And we want to promote multimodal trails, right? That's part of the plan.
Well,
yeah, but
then you
I-
put the caveat then that it's not for snowmobiles.
We can take snowmobile out.
that's what I was getting at, is because it's a recreation activity. It's not true, it's not transportation.
Okay. All right, okay, so we're up to 1.2, okay? Now. So 80% of the 8 lots is how much? 6? Okay, so 6 of these, now if they have a shared driveway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They share it. They're gonna get 7.5. So 8 times 7.5. 4.0. 0.6. Okay. Now, if 10% of them are deeded to the housing trust. He can increase density by 10% over the number of the lots allowed. Or 5% for every lot deeded to the trust, so he's gonna give. This ugly corner lot, he maybe doesn't like it. It's not as desirable, I'm gonna give that to the trust. So he gets 0.05 for that lot.
Okay.
For every repurposed dwelling, moved on, blah, blah, blah. He gets 5%.
I have a question on the affordable housing. Can we say it's just the Door County Housing Trust? Or could, I mean, I guess I would be more comfortable saying somebody whose mission it is. I mean, right now it's Door County Housing Trust. That's the only thing that's out there.
Yeah, we could, my concern when I wrote it was, how many times do people say it's low income and it's really not low income? That was just my thought on it. Because we see that already, right? I'm building a low income house and then next thing you know, it's transferred, sold again and again, and it's no longer low income. Right now in Door County, the only one I know of that has a good model is the valid model is the housing.
Yeah, I could also see somebody putting together an organization that has that as their mission, but maybe isn't the mission. I'm just thinking in the future, hopefully there will.
But it could be changed then, I suppose, at that point in time.
If somebody shows up, we could add them in.
Yeah, I think I'd rather add them in than make it blanket, because I'm afraid it's gonna get manipulated.
So what would it take to add that in? Could we, make-
Well, but go before the plan commission, public hearing.
is there a way we could have that, a list that the board just approves somebody to be part of the. Or a plan commission does it, so we don't have to go, you know, because that would take a
No,
whole.
by law, we have, it's an ordinance, by
Okay.
law, we have. Okay, so, now repurposing, for every repurposed dwelling contractually obligated, this is that whole reuse thing. The Green Tier Legacy Committee, is very supportive of this. So let's say it's moved on and it meets architectural standards. We're gonna get 5%. 0.4 again?
Yeah.
Okay. He agrees they're not gonna be a short-term rental, so we're gonna add another 0.4. And he's gonna make sure that for every dwelling unit obligated for use as a long-term rental and made available to Sister Bay's workforce, the deed to the property of which restricts the unit for long-term rental purposes only, the rent of which does not exceed 30% of the county's median household income, the subdivisor is allowed a 5% density bonus.
See, but
Okay. These are all the incentives you can have, so Dave, can you add
but
those
what
up?
if somebody wanted to, what if they want to sell them? Here, they're only getting an incentive.
If he wants to sell them, then he can't go for the incentive.
Okay.
Because it's meant to be long-term rental, workforce housing.
But it could be sold to somebody else who intends to rent them and
Yes.
maintain that.
Yep.
So it's gonna have the effect of
It's
keeping
gonna
that.
take, you have to have deed restrictions. So,
I'm
okay,
gonna-
so add this up.
Because I'm just thinking about, we're incentivizing
4.2,
rentals instead of incentivizing them selling them for a reasonable price to get locals into their first home.
There's gotta be a mix of it. I mean, like, it's not everybody wants to own a home. I mean, if you look at the demographics and what's happening with younger people, people don't necessarily want to buy a house. So I hear what you're saying, Denise, but I think that also is part of our housing issues. In people can't even get a place to rent here.
Right.
well, what I was thinking of is I look at guys like Tom Nesbitt from the Piggly Wiggly. He buys houses for his employees to make sure he has employees. He wants to make sure they have a place to live, so he buys the house to make sure he can have that employed. Here's a house, now you can work from me, because otherwise they don't have housing. So it's the incentive to say to Al Johnson's, buy some of these long-term for your employees to address the workforce issue. So, and he doesn't have to take advantage of it, but let's say somebody took advantage of every single density bonus that was out there. In this case, we round up, right? So in this case, he can get 5 more lots.
I hate rounding up. 4.2 is
Yeah.
a far cry from 5. No, we round down.
Round down.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
Because we do that for, we have done it in the past for parking. If you needed,
Yeah.
Okay, so he's gonna get 4.
So there goes the forest.
No,
they're denser lots, and it's still gonna have the same footprint, it's just gonna have more lots on it, or more buildings.
So we lost some open space.
No, not really.
Not really, the lots just maybe got smaller, because they
Yeah,
still have to
Oh,
meet the
So-
40% criteria.
okay, so we can mess with that, okay.
Okay, but how small can you make the lots?
Well, they have to be able to still, have a building site and meet setbacks, is what it says.
Yeah.
So,
So it may be difficult.
Well, and what, the houses that Mariah is going to build. I think they're targeting 1,200 square feet, I'm trying to remember.
No, I thought they were a little bigger than
What do you think they
that.
are?
They were 3-bedroom.
So they were maybe 2,000 square feet, but they were gonna sell for like $1.25 or $2.25, something. Okay, so it's about a 2,000 square foot house,
No, I think that's too big.
I think it's
1,800.
square feet or something like that.
Maybe 15,
Okay,
16.
you know, if you go 2 stories, you can get a lot of stuff in. If your ranches, not so much.
so they still have to, like I said, meet the setbacks. We eventually have to talk about, and I think we know this, we have to talk about minimum house sizes, once we get further on the Wilson site to see what we should be.
We should
that
always-
might change. But this is what happens, so in this particular case, you preserve all of this. And you have 12 lots. You got 4 lots, basically 4 lots for doing everything we wanted them to do.
So, and in this case, we've still held to the 40% open space.
Yes.
That can't be played with,
Okay,
right?
then it really comes down
Yeah,
to
it's-
the houses that they're gonna put on there and how they get cluttered. And that would drive them towards the shared driveway and things like that too. Okay,
Now, I've done this in areas that were not on sewer, where if they share a septic or share a well, they get bonus points. But we don't want to make them do that here. That's
No.
not a good idea on our landscape. here.
Wherever this is gonna happen, it should be on sewer and water. Something else I think we should consider giving a bonus for is transportation access. There's a concept that's very prevalent out there today, transit-oriented developments. And I don't know exactly if that's even gonna come into play for a while here, but gosh, I hope someday we have some sort of transit system. And access to it at one of these developments would enable greater density because you have less parking spaces and all the like, if you have reliable transit. I mean, I think the case that has happened in Sister Bay, in the Peach Barn, when they had, when we have these many people here, they're coming to be at the trolley, and that we rounded up there. That's probably a little bit aspirational at this point. But if we put it in the code, maybe somebody will actually look at it and say, yeah, I want to make this happen.
Yeah, so with transit oriented development, a lot of times what you'll see is where there's a bus stop right here. Or, easier access to a trolley line or something like that. I agree with where you're going, Nate. I don't think we have the infrastructure to go there.
But if we put it out there, I mean,
But we added though, once we have the infrastructure.
yeah. The other thing.
You know, what about just putting? So we have numbers. So number 8 is long-term rental. What if we just put in a number 9 and a heading, so we don't lose sight of it?
Yeah.
But no words underneath it, so
Just
when
put
that
it in.
time comes, it's reserved for
Do
the
you want it to
future.
say reserved for transit oriented development? Center? Or just
Yeah.
reserved?
Yeah, sure.
And to go back to the trails, I think the other thing that it sounds kind of obvious, but I think we need to say is they need to be connected into other trails. If we're not connecting in there, it's not meaningful trail. I mean, if it's just on its own, you can get around your neighborhood, that's not good, that doesn't meet the requirement, in my opinion, to
Of
get
the
to
bigger picture.
yeah, the density bonus.
However, that means the only one we can do this on is Wiltsey.
Well, can we give a Can we do a 2-tiered bonus that says if you put these trails, I mean, then if they're there and they get connected later on. That's still a good thing. But I do think the density bonus makes even more sense if it gets it so they're connected to a larger trail system or a larger sidewalk or. So they can actually get out of that development area.
Yeah, because with when you look at our large parcels, the only one of them that is on a trail or a proposed trail that's zoned residential, or would be zoned residential, is Wilson. There's some large parcels out on South 57, but those are zoned business. And then we have, there's own trails all by Countryside, in a countryside zone. So it's our goal to try and get them to connect. Now, we want this guy, we want his neighbor to come in. And we want his neighbor to preserve his matching woodland. And we want the trail, you know, let's say this was the trail, we want him to connect that trail.
But the other thing, so let's just say there's one lot between there's some area some area between the two. That might incentivize that person to figure out how to get a trail to connect to them so they can get that bonus.
Yeah, I think we would offer the incentive if it connects to other public trails.
Yeah, or again, we could do 2 tiers on it, say if you have the infrastructure, great. If it connects to existing wider infrastructure, even better.
Yeah, because again, using Wiltshire as it's on us to get our trail out there. And the developer says, hey, I want to do it, but you guys got to get going. Why are you penalizing me?
But then we can say, well, help us pay for this trail. We're just gonna connect it out there. I mean, that's.
I'm only thinking about the challenges that everybody has had up here for the years has been to get to the developers because of the prices, get the developers interested. So without giving away the farm, the more attractive we can make it for them to build. So I just want to be a little careful about the connectivity.
How do you feel about 2 tiers on there to say if you do it, you get this, and if you get connected, you get this, you get a little bit more?
It sounds good, except again, in this the theory I'm thinking about, we get somebody to bite and we're not done. We're not, because who's creating the trails? Like, for instance, the trail we're gonna do down 57. Is there anybody gonna be? Is there anything possible down there?
At the very south end, but it's zoned, if I remember right, it's zoned.
Oh, that's the dude,
business.
which is here.
It's a church. But I think it
Oh.
just changed hands to,
What's the
Housing,
golf course, still golf course zone?
Is that
I have the map right here.
institutional? It's.
No, I think it's. Golf course is Countryside.
So that would be a perfect place to do something.
They'd want to rezone it because you would never get any density in countryside.
But
It would be a good place to do something like this.
and that is a place where we plan to put a trail on one side of that road.
yeah, no, so let's talk about density, or I'm sorry, Countryside, this isn't much of an incentive to Countryside.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
So I don't know, I mean, that's where you want to see clustering, because you've got all that open space. But this isn't gonna help it much unless we offer higher percentages in different zoning districts.
And you don't want to do that.
Yeah, so that's what we have to think about it, you know, right now, this is gonna work really good on a more residentially zoned lot.
I don't know that we're gonna get a lot of traction on CS1. I think that if somebody really wants to do development in CS1, they're gonna want to change the zone.
Possibly, yeah. So based on this, I'm not gonna do a presentation, that's fine, okay?
You just did it, or
Just everybody understands, but.
Yep.
You're getting pretty crazy.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave that up.
Nice job, thank you.
looks good on paper. It doesn't work.
It actually looks really nice, though, in practicality, because instead of seeing, it depends what you like, but instead of seeing house, you're seeing woods, you're seeing pond, you're seeing trails, and a couple. of things. So. It did fit. You know, there's a lot of reasons when we look at it, you know, we want to reduce, I know we don't talk so much about impervious surface, but we want to reduce pervious surfaces to reduce runoff. So the more impervious, the better.
The less impervious.
Less pervious. No, less impervious, sorry.
So. We talk about, for example, if the zoning ordinance requires a lot to have 40%. And it's a bad example. Because we don't have that anywhere in our code. R1 is 20%, R2 is 60%, R3 is 80%, R4 is 50%. Countryside is 90%. B1 and B2 is 20%, B3 is 10%. So. That means if somebody wanted to do this in R3. They're looking at 80% open space. How does
Doesn't work.
this apply to that now?
Not gonna.
It
Is
won't
that where,
apply.
is that our goal there? though?
It's not financially feasible
No,
for the developer. They gotta sell houses.
yeah, that's way too much land.
Right?
Wait, you're saying not to have 40% open?
No, for the 80.
It says, but it says here, for example, if the zoning ordinance requires a lot to have 40%. But these are the percentage, we don't even have a 40%, so if somebody wanted to do this in R3. They're required 80%,
Yeah,
that doesn't work in an 80% open space lot.
so maybe we set a certain percentage and that's what we live with.
So if you want to do cluster housing, then. There's a different open space
We override.
requirement. Right?
You would.
If we did that, like, let's say we said, if you're gonna cluster, you have to have 50% open space. I don't care what zoning district you're in, 50% has to be open, or 40%. That overrides the individual zoning ordinance requirement.
Should we also state in there that you have to be on sewer and water? I mean, because like some of these places that are out on Woodcrest.
I don't know. Well, let's think about that.
Absolutely.
So-
I don't think, because we talked about that when we were dealing with the country lane lot. That we don't want to keep expanding. Without having sewer and water. It's for the village's best interest to have. It eventually sewered almost everywhere.
I would say it's even beyond the village, because we've been on sewer and water. We do more to protect our water quality of the whole area.
So this would then say that we would have to. Somebody's out on Woodcrest towards the end there. And we're nowhere, where's the sewer end? Right
Right here,
on Maple?
right here on
Yeah.
Woodcrest and
Okay,
Maple.
so as we go that way. So I guess the village then would have to be willing to maybe share on getting the sewer and water down there.
Or it's just something gradual like it's always been. Somebody develops those,
Yeah.
the first 40 or 80 acres, extends it, there's a dead end, the next person. Somebody else buys the next 40 or 80 and finally get to
We're
the
not
point.
going, yeah, we're not gonna allow them to be annexed unless they're gonna be on sewer and water.
Yeah.
And they're gonna.
Just remind me that our plant is plenty big for.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah, in order to annex, you have to have sewer and water.
Yeah. We're not gonna take them without it.
So it is going to keep that densification from happening out on Woodcrest, but that's until there's sewer there, but that's what we want.
Right, we want to infill and slowly grow out.
I could see dominoes falling, like if
Right.
you have somebody that does a development, then you might see a somewhat rapid succession of development going out there because of this, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
And it's
too.
more appropriate for the fringe of your community, right? Because it's slowly more of a rural flavor to it. I mean, how many times do you go to a community and there's a cookie cutter subdivision, bam, and then there's a farm? Whereas this allows that more gradual transition into rural America. Let's go back to the 40% before we get too far, the green space. So maybe we're better off saying that they all have to have at least 40% green space. Regardless of the code. Or 50%, or
Sandwich boards. What is the unintended consequence of doing that?
yeah, that's what we gotta think about it.
What is that going to, and I mean, like, so all of a sudden you could see. A lot of development out in CS1 and then R3 that currently there's not, it's not. Very conducive for development, and that's where I would see.
Well, it's gonna require more green space than R1 currently would.
Mhm.
It's not gonna require as much as R2. Is there a R3? Oh, R3 is the large lot.
Yeah, that's all the.
All down
here.
I think almost all of these are developed. I mean, this is the wedding barn, right?
No, that's, where are we? Fieldcrest.
Here's
Okay.
the historic society. Oh, wait,
No,
here's the
that's-
historic society.
right.
Here's the county. Yeah, this is the wedding barn.
Matt
I think.
Tischler. Weavers. Huntsman or somebody owns something over there.
So I think something you
Your only big piece, right?
could see happen is you could see redevelopment too, if
Right,
on these areas, because it could be conducive to do that. And that's a perfectly.
oh no, these are the what, one or both of these does Bud own? Remember Nate, David Peterson?
Are you
He
talking about?
owns by some land, he owns one of these two lots, maybe this one's Kunstman, maybe this one's David Peterson. That he's waiting to develop this. So with all of this there, that could possibly be something, but it's not long and narrow, doesn't make it too conducive for
Yeah.
cluster housing, we need,
You're gonna need a long road through there.
yeah.
And then and then R4 is ours. Or Wiltsey would be R4. That'd be the only R4, right? We don't have.
Right, we don't have anything R4.
So
yet.
basically, that's ours, and we're saying we'd let it go at 40%, but since it's our development, hopefully we do better than that. And but countryside could be an issue, because right now we require 90% in countryside.
But how much of that countryside has access to sewer and water?
So you have the golf course, you have the property on Country Lane that we saw a couple of weeks ago. And we have all of this on Woodcrest. So this is huge here.
I guess I'm not concerned about Country Lane so much if we're requiring sewer and water.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that either.
And I think that. the
But
golf-
somebody would rezone. If it's countryside, they would rezone.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm trying to avoid in here is to name a zoning district, so it doesn't become a de facto zoning ordinance.
See, and I don't think that it should be allowed in R1, and Nate's probably gonna disagree with me. Because I do, for as much. And I've read a lot of articles about how R1 has hindered a lot of things. I also think that there's a certain group of people that want to live in an R1 district. And like, I mean, it's still not a huge lot, 20,000 square feet. That we leave R1 alone for now and see what kind of, how this helps maybe someone, and we're certainly not gonna allow it in any of the business districts.
Yeah, right now we say it's just for residentially zoned districts, including countries.
So, I mean, what would it even really do in R1 anyway? I mean, ultimately,
I mean, they're pretty, well, you could have people,
Well, just imagine if Wiltsey was R1, you would have the houses.
it won't be R1.
No, but I'm just saying, imagine, okay? It's kind of the same thing. You're just clustering all the houses around areas and preserving parkland, basically.
but in existing R1, I don't think.
I don't think you have any land.
Country Lane. Those.
Those are already
The white, no,
developed.
these
Oh,
here,
this
but
one
see,
shows
these
them.
are long and thin, none of those are gonna be conducive,
These, I think, have homes on them.
yeah.
Yeah,
You have that one, which I
Yes,
think
sir.
has a home on it too.
Right, I think this was the picture that Dan Mortier showed us of the neighbors, I think their houses on that big lot, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you have any R1 property.
I guess as I look at it, I just can't imagine that somebody's gonna buy an R1 lot and make a meaningful concept.
Right.
As much as I'd like to argue with you on these, it's just, why, like it's. Well, nothing, I think that what I would look at in an R1 in this spirit would be to do something for ADUs. It's not gonna be a cluster housing sort of.
Right. So then do we agree that we would not allow this in R1?
Now, devil's advocate. What if somebody annexed 40 acres at the north end, zoned it all R1, so we don't have spot zoning, and wanted to do a cluster development? Let's. Right here,
To buy up North Spring Road.
right here.
We're staying out on hill.
Yeah,
Oh.
this is an example, on Hill Road.
Well, why would they?
Well, we're just looking.
They
at
would zone it R2.
Well, it's R1, adjacent to R1, so why wouldn't they go R1?
Do you remember the Swenson property that they always wanted to? I mean, that's a big hunk.
It is. They'd have to annex, they'd have to be on sewer and water.
And it would be R1.
So I mean, if you had something, you may not have it now. that kind of
Okay.
Cluster, but it could.
All, so we put that same verbiage in that we used again over and over again. As of such and such a date, anything zoned R1 does not apply to cluster housing. If we have something in the future that would make sense, like that parcel,
Yep.
then it's okay. So that excludes everything that's already R1 in pretty small lots, except a couple of places.
But they're all developed already. It's a non-issue.
But I think you still have to write, I think you still have to write it in there.
I really think we're gonna see, depending on how this is written, we could potentially see some redevelopment for locations. I mean, I think that really what it comes down to for R1, if we could see an example of what could actually happen there, because as much as it's not worth pushing for, because it's not likely to get used, it's also probably just okay to permit it because it's extremely unlikely to get used, especially if we had some of these density requirements, these bonuses set to make it so it likely would never happen in R1, they wouldn't get significant bonuses. And like, just like we did an example of 40 acre on there, like, what is a,
I mean, the concern is because they're only at 20% open space.
Yeah, but
That
you're
one-
talking about changing everything to 40.
If they cluster, yeah,
If they-
but as an example, an idea. Cause I was gonna say, if R1, if we're trying to prevent it in R1. requiring them to have 40% open space actually helps get to the goal of more green space. So then,
So we're gonna go from 20% if they're not clustered to 40% if they are.
unless you exempt them, that's what I was trying to say, why are we trying to exempt them?
What would that look, I mean, like, if you're on a small lot and you have 40%. That really makes it challenging to make
It
that.
means
into-
basically about half the property has to be remain open and green. And you have to fit all the lots on the other half, like you have up there.
So then to do that, maybe you could get a couple 900 square foot houses. Maybe,
Or you'd have to buy 2 lots. And then the pricing starts to get. I know,
Crazy.
we're not supposed to talk numbers, but that's,
so then you'd have 2 lots, you'd have to do CSM to put them back together and then to make it so you can cluster. them.
You wouldn't have enough. I guess I
Practically
just
speaking,
don't know where you would do that because
I'm looking on
why,
the GIS map now.
because why would you? Pay for individual lots and then pay to combine them and then pay to redivide them to maybe get another lot. Financially, it's just not worth it.
no. I can't,
And to cluster, it, you'd have to now put in a road too.
practically speaking, cluster housing doesn't work in R1.
Existing R1.
Right, and that's all I'm saying, that anything that's zoned R1 right now,
But I'm saying you don't even need to say that, I'm just saying. practically
I'll feel better if it says that. I understand your point.
And I'm just trying
Outcome
to,
based, Denise, so I'm fine with that.
and I'm just trying to avoid putting specific zoning districts in here that so it doesn't become a de facto zone.
so then let's talk about, if we agree to that. With the, as of this date. Is 40 the number, is 50 the number? Of open space.
You know, if, right, the lower the better, but at some point in time, when we determined that our 4,500 square foot lot minimum should have 50% green space. Or was that number wrong?
That's kind of unrealistic, because if you have a 4,500 square foot lot and 2,500 has to be green space. So let's figure out, you've got 4,500,
Get a driveway,
I'm gonna get a driveway. I'm gonna
they're
get
also
that,
for small houses.
I'm gonna get a 1,200 square foot home.
I mean, they were, that's, I think, what the intention was, that they were gonna be relatively small starter homes.
Yeah.
Oh, going back to the. When I was talking about, there's no incentive for somebody coming in and. Having it be their first starter home, Nate, and you said,
If people aren't, that's not necessarily what
right.
people want.
But I read when I was doing some research on the STR stuff, and I went on to the Wisconsin Realtors website. And they put out kind of a monthly blurb, just in general on what's going on in Wisconsin. And I used to have it bookmarked here and I finally, I got rid of it. Where it talked about how we are shortchanging multiple generations of having wealth in the future by not being able to own their own home. And to me, that's really important. Know what?
So there's. That is one of the reasons that we have the housing issue we've got, is because we have this expectation that our houses will continuously go up in value. And we have a national policies that make sure that happens. And then we wonder why our housing is so expensive. It's because we're doing everything to drive the cost of housing up. So the very thing that's causing the housing to not be affordable is being cited as a reason to make more housing. I kind of think it's the snake eating its tail.
As a mother of two children. I will say, unless something changes, my children will never have a home. They'll never be able to have equity, they'll never be able to build wealth. Unless stuff like this happens, where you're allowing homes on 4,500 square foot lots. And then, once they get it substantially paid for, they can sell it, even if it's for what they paid for it. They now have that money to reinvest in a larger home.
I guess then my reaction to that is because it's the same argument that's right there. I actually do think we need to mix a lot of things in there. We need rental and we also do need.
Agreed.
So that my visceral reaction is just to hear that same thing.
Right.
It's part of the cause of the problem.
But there are, my son, for a while, is not bought into a neighborhood that was primarily couples that were getting their first house. I personally wouldn't have lived in the house myself, didn't like staying there, but there was a whole community of them and they had a house. And they'd all moved from rentals. And they had, 15 square feet of grass in their backyard and they were, like that, so.
It's a different world now than when we bought our first homes. You and I.
But we have to provide that, and not only that,
Yeah.
let's face it, the data that's out there too, homeownership reduces social problems. Less alcoholism, less abuse, etc. So we have to have a mechanism of providing them, even if they're 800 square feet, somebody has home ownership, their life is completely different.
I think that there's a little bit of. You have stakeholders in the community and that's a great way to be a stakeholder. It's not the only way, but it's a very simple way to filter out that.
So there's a small house community down outside of Egg Harbor. I've not driven down there. Yeah,
Are you thinking that-
It's not really.
It's actually a campground, it's park models, I
Oh.
think is when you're
it's
talking
not,
about.
oh,
270 units, you can't live there, you're.
It's on regular houses
okay.
and such.
I mean, there are, what was the point I was just gonna make when you said something, Nate? Right, we have to give people the opportunity that if they want. If they want to invest in a home, that there are places that they can do it. Oh, I know what it was. There are, I brought this up a couple of months ago. I don't know if it was at board or plan. Where I talked about a friend of mine. He and his wife both have 2 jobs. They barely found a place to rent. They are constantly looking, everything is out of their price range, and they plan on moving out of Northern Door County at the end of this season, because they do want a home. But in subsequent conversations, what they do right now with their money is very different, knowing that they will never own a home here. They spend it different, and they spend it. Now, is that good for the economy as a whole? Sure, but is that good? When you have no hope of something, then what do you need to save your money for? So there's that aspect of it too. People kind of just throw their arms up in the air and say, well, okay, let's go ahead and let's spend this on that, whatever it is, because
That's the plight of the LMI, there's that hopelessness, why not go and get the 12-pack of beer and the carton of cigarettes? What is that, $20 or $30, whatever it is, what is that gonna get me, right? So
carton of cigarettes, 100.
So they go for that instant gratification because there's such a hopelessness, it's never gonna happen, but. So on this, I'll put in the R1 as of this date. Not sure if it's legal, but we're gonna do it. I don't think it's gonna hurt, nobody's gonna question us on that,
It is legal because we put it other places.
in the zoning. And then what I'm gonna do, if I'm okay, I'm gonna say it's 40% for all zones then. And I'm gonna leave the word in there that says the plan commission may require a larger percentage of green space than required above or something.
in here, it doesn't explicitly say you have to be on sewer and water, does it?
Yeah.
Cause I would like to see that. in
Yes.
there.
Yeah, that's very
And I did add that, I made a little.
in your
note there.
notes, okay. So, so can I just ask some general questions then? Um. So it's on line 44 on page 51. However, in no circumstance shall density be more than double what it would have been allowed by developing as a traditional subdivision. Is that? Yeah, where I wrote no, discuss. Um. Do we think 80% is okay? Because if they still have to meet the 40% open space. Then we don't care.
Can we trust the math that we just did? I mean, we just did the max here and that wasn't. So,
No, I mean, we can change the percentages, we
If
can
I
play
make
around with
sense.
this.
that,
So we were what? 150%, we went from what, 8 to
You got 4 lots.
four more lots, 8
Yeah.
50%.
150%.
and that was them hitting every one of them. Except for the connect bonus we haven't talked about. So,
In reality is they're not gonna hit everyone that, because they're probably not gonna do long-term rental, they're probably not gonna do the.
well, you know, I'm glad we put it out because I think if we look at, we're gonna need long-term rentals out there. And they're gonna have to be, in fact, the Shoals or whatever the new place is. How affordable is that stuff? That, you know, that it,
It's a challenge. It's a really big challenge because it's got federal money behind it. So you have to make little enough money to qualify for it, which most people that work a job in Door County make more money than that.
Yep,
oh,
it's turned into retirement.
oh,
And honestly, we need more housing units, so it's not a bad thing, but it's not doing, I think, what we all hoped it would do.
Right, it's doing what Pat Duffy said, it's gonna be retirement housing. How do we guarantee that it doesn't become that? And Marissa
So-
kept saying, it's income based, it's income based. Well, from the conversations, the angry conversations I had with Marissa months ago. I did ask her, and I need to follow up either with Marissa or their manager, who is Lauren Aurelius. I seen that the village put in money for infrastructure into this project, thinking that it was being told that it was going to be workforce housing and would really help, and that is not what it's turned out to be. Just as an example. Yes, it's income based. Nate is exactly right. You need to make under $51,000. Well, if you are a waitress, bartender, whatever, and the way wages has gone up. You're making that, and especially if you're 2 people, by far you're making that, simply don't qualify. So who does that leave? People on fixed incomes, retirement. But what I have found out in the meantime is that you can own all kinds of stuff. But if you're not earning any income from it,
You can be
Doesn't-
asset rich.
you can be asset rich. And that's not necessarily against Marissa. Those are the federal guidelines that they have to follow, and there's something wrong with that. Now, I'm gonna get off on a tangent, I'm sorry here, but there was a local girl, 3 children. And her significant other died. She had not been able for almost a year to find a place to rent. She was living with her mother and her 3 children. Applied up to the Shoals. And because their father died and they receive SSI. Put them over. So she is paying market rate now with 3 children for rent. And she took it because she has nowhere else to go. And that's a stretch now for her.
I'm telling you, the system is broken. We have to, on that Wiltsey property, we have to have deed restrictions on those every time we sell it to a developer or anybody else to make sure that we are protecting these people. The
Because
only way we
our
can
best
sell
laid
it-
plans didn't come to
No.
fruition.
No, it's not
And the-
working the way we would like to have it work.
And look at all the money put into that, the county put in and that the village put in.
Yeah.
I think it's a great project. I'm glad it's there, but I just don't think it's what we expected, but, okay.
So so still on page 51, somewhere. we didn't
Say one more thing on that.
Yeah,
That's why I kind of just glossed over taking federal money, or that sort of those little blocks, because I think it just ties
For
that.
housing.
Yep.
I agree. We don't qualify anyway.
You're on page 51.
yeah, somewhere in
In the
this,
packet or in the code?
oh, in packet. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is June's packet. Well, because that's where all my notes were. I wasn't gonna reread it and transfer the notes. I saved it.
What section are you?
I'm still in cluster subdivisions.
Okay.
On the first page, so somewhere under natural features, and I wrote.
That'd be the second column, parent, 2 parent.
Line 61 on page 29 of the packets.
Okay. So it should still start somewhere. Dedicated to a homeowners association formed to protect the feature into perpetuity, including the control of invasive species. Proof of the establishment of a homeowners association and their commitment to preserve and maintain the feature shall be required prior to final plat approval. So my question was, why wouldn't there be a deed restriction on that natural feature? Can you not?
Who owns it?
Oh, there will be. We're gonna have, so on the plat, it's gonna
Okay,
be,
so I know that we're deed restricting the housing, but this is talking about a natural feature.
so it does, it gets delineated on the plat
Okay,
and then.
Okay.
Preserved into perpetuity.
okay.
I think that's a great question, the data. So that would have to be a homeowners association that own that green space. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what
Who do
you
we,
do,
who do we go after if they don't do it?
the members of the homeowners
Okay, so
association,
that has, okay,
because it can't be the developer, because the developers are long gone.
Right.
We see that all the time where the developer has to set land aside or maybe do a stormwater pond. He bails out, he leaves, and then you're stuck with a weed bed, right? So this makes sure that there's somebody responsible for it moving forward.
Because I haven't read the article. Broken promises. It's in the New York Times. It came out on Sunday. New York let developers build larger towers in exchange for public space.
Yeah.
The city often didn't get their end of the deal. So when you did the math over here, if we. The next thing is just kind of all the percentages.
I just threw those out so we can adjust those.
but I'm assuming that you just didn't drink a cup of coffee, stare at the ceiling, that there was some reason that you came up with those.
I was
Maybe you
just,
did, little,
yeah, I
little
was just
schnapper.
going off of other codes that I've written for density management and cluster subdivision. And I remember, it'd be like a 7.5 or a 10% or a 5%, because you want them to try and take advantage of the incentives to make the better develop. So, I mean, you're not gonna give a 20% incentive normally you're not gonna give a 20% incentive for preserving green space, or that's a lot, on let's say it's a 20-acre parcel, because how many times are we really gonna see a 40-acre parcel? So what we can do, and maybe what we should do, is revisit the percentage after everybody has to have homework And they have to play with different size lots. Now that you know how to do it, and we come back and revisit the percentages.
Well, I think the affordable housing part should be the largest. And if they deed it over to the housing trust, I'm willing to give them 20% for that and being the top percentage. And, you know, whether they have shared driveways, you know, that's up to them. I understand it's less, you know, pervious surface. Drop that to 5, but I can do the math, but I really think that we should highlight that for the housing trust.
Now, keep in mind with this one, it was, they get the 10% density bonus. And then for every lot, they're gonna get another 5. So let's say they give 2 of the homes, that's a 20% bonus.
Oh, just 2 of the homes.
Yeah,
All
if they
right,
give
okay.
two lots, that's a 20% bonus right there. That's a lot.
Okay, never mind then.
So. The short-term rental one, 5% seems a little bit modest on that to me. I also think that one could get us in court, and I think I'm okay with that. I think it's worth mentioning here.
But you know what, here's the thing with it, Nate. We're not making them, we are not requiring them. We are saying, hey, if you want some extra lots, this is how you get it. And if they don't want to do that, we don't make them. So I don't think we're in trouble.
You
Well,
can sell
no,
your
but
house tomorrow
I'm
and put the deed restriction in it, and you're not violating the law.
Sure. I guess I'm saying I could see this running afoul, but I'm also perfectly okay with that because I think this is done in a reasonable, intelligent way that is defensible. I agree with what you're saying.
Right,
Yeah.
because I don't want to see any there.
But you were saying you think the number is too small, Nate, or the percentage, you're thinking it should be what, like 10?
Yeah.
10%?
Mhm.
Maybe we should go through each one and look at the percentages. You want to do that?
Or do you want to do what you're saying and should we just revisit this after we look at it all?
I like the 10%. I'm okay with that. And forget what I said about the other thing, because it's the 10 plus the 5. Just ignore me as usual.
How about if let's just kind of keep going on it and let me tweak this, get it out to you. And then everybody have their like little homework and they come up with some scenarios under the
I can
revised.
spend
version.
hours on the spreadsheet on this and just have waste all kind of time.
Are you saying you're dirty that way and you look forward to doing that?
Life is a spreadsheet.
I think it's really good that you look at every scenario. Let me tweak it based on what we talked about today. Send it out to the group, everybody does their homework, and we can discuss the cluster part next month, if you're okay with it.
Sure.
But maybe we can work through the rest of it, so we just have to revisit the cluster part.
So one of the final questions I have is, can new owners change a deed restriction?
No.
Well,
Okay,
Can it ever be undone?
Like court order. A judge could do it.
Okay.
That's the only way you can change a deed restriction.
What sort of circumstances would a judge do that? Are you aware of any? I should ask first.
I know of one and I have to think about what happened, and I think it was a family situation. But I don't remember it.
Or maybe they weren't authorized to.
I don't remember it.
Okay.
I'd have to think about that long and hard.
Let me give you the easy one, page 14 of the code. Line 96.
oh, we're out of cluster housing?
Well, oh, I'm sorry, I got out of cluster, never mind.
Okay, so the last thing then that I have on cluster housing is on the last page, and it talks about unsewered lots and incentives. And I agree, everything just needs to be in sewer and water, and I think that just needs to go away, even though it says, you know, won't be allowed the same density incentives, we need to make sure. Why would we want possibly a larger development, even 10 homes? To not be on sewer and water.
So just make it's just clarify, strike that last sentence basically,
Well, no,
or just fix it so it's only sewer.
right, and all of number 2 goes away.
I think, let me look at it, because I think the right way for me to do it is developments which are not served by public sewer and water shall not be eligible for cluster subdivision and density.
Oh,
Something
okay,
or something
different,
like that,
just
yeah.
totally different.
Same
wording.
message though.
Okay.
Okay. Ready to move on with the ordinance? Okay,
The official map?
yep. So. Changes on page 9. Do you mind if I just take the lead, Denise?
Go ahead.
Changes on page 9. Page 10. Page 11.
I can't even scroll, oh. 12, I have things.
You and your red pen.
It's purple pen, because when you write, when you type in, I can't use the red pen.
Okay, so we're on page 12. Which is, section 54.60. Denise.
Right, so starting on line 3, before filing of an application for the approval of a preliminary plat or certified survey map, it is advised the subdivider submit a conceptual plan. Why are we only, I think it shall. Like, why don't we just make them?
Well, you don't right now,
No, it was in there, it's stricken.
but you don't make them do it.
Well, I'm not in the office, I'm not in control of what's going on there.
So the way it works is we encourage them, we want them to, because we don't want them to come into a preliminary plat meeting and waste their money and get struck down. So we encourage them to, but we don't require them. And I wish I had the statutes with me. I think the statutes say, I think the statutes don't say shall. Not that we have to follow that on that one, but we could say shall. I can leave it as
I
shall.
mean, it was there, if we weren't asking for it or implementing it, that's a whole different scenario, but it was shall. How does anybody else feel?
Let me check on that and see what the statute.
Yeah, I mean, it's their own good to put a conceptual plan together
To get our feedback right off the bat.
and. Yeah,
Okay, next.
If we continue with that. Why are we striking the village engineer? And leaving the zoning administrator in there? Seeing that you want to get rid of the zoning administrator everywhere else.
Yeah, that should say village administrator or designee.
Well, no, I brought that up last month, village engineer was stricken a lot of places.
That's because when you're, so at that stage of it,
Oh, preliminary consultation.
Yeah, but. Even still, you might at some time not have a public works person. And you want to give it to the village engineer. I mean, why take it out? Why not just leave it in? Because you leave it in everywhere else.
public works director or village engineer. And the village administrator or their designee,
Sure.
okay.
right?
Yep.
Okay, good catch.
I mean, that's
Where is that? What line is that on?
5 or 6.
Okay.
And I see I have zoning administrator in there again. I'll be honest with you, I've done searches on those and I didn't find them, so I think,
Well, we know your computer doesn't know what time it is.
So then, same page, line 45, where it's 4 copies to the supervisor of the plat review unit. We don't have one of those. In the Department of Administration, are we talking about DOA at the state?
and so this is out of statute. They used to require the 4 copies, you no longer have to do 4 copies. You used to have to do 6 to the county, you no longer have to do 6.
Okay,
That's all changed to meet staff.
all right.
And I had a question about, is 2 days enough time to do that?
That's actually in statute,
Is it,
yeah. I don't think that's much at all, but that's what it says.
that's overtime?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you imagine doing that? Okay, it's short-term rental season and all, you gotta drop everything to get these copies off.
You can't do that in 2 days.
I agree.
Line 55. If the subdivision is not served by a public sewer and provision for that service has not been made, the Department of Safety and Professional Services. Should it say sewer and water? And
Again, that was just out of statutes.
I don't understand it. I don't understand D at all.
How about if we fix it, if subdivision is not served by a public sewer system, sewer and water system?
I still don't understand the sentence.
Okay, so you're talking about who gets copies. So. If the subdivision is not served by a public sewer and water system. And provision for that service has not been made, then a copy goes to the Department of Safety and Professional Services,
Okay,
because you're talking about who gets copies.
okay. Line 67, just a typo, Director of Public Works. That's all I had on that page.
Anybody else on page 12? Page 13.
Line 10, typo on preliminary.
Good catch.
And then I have circled on line 56, agency review within 20 days of the date of receiving the copies of the plat, any state or county agency having authority is that statute also.
Yep, all of that statute.
So if, and then farther down on 68, if the objecting agency fails to act within the 20-day limit, it shall be deemed to have no objection.
All statute.
Okay. And what about the 20 days that it talks about the plan
All
commission?
statute.
Not happy. Okay. That's all I had.
Anybody else on 13? 14.
I had on line 96. Plan Commission has 30 days from the date of the filing, which under all circumstances work for me, except that we take December off. So we could not, if somebody came into us in November and we didn't go to our next meeting, we would not abide by this.
We
Now, it
have
might
to-
be a niggle, but
What we've done in the past is if that happens, then you have to have a plan commission meeting.
do they pay for it or is that on the house?
No, village just pays for it.
Okay. All
What
right,
I would do is I would ask the subdivider if they would sign a statement agreeing that they have waived.
because we tend to see a lot of this stuff over the winter, so.
Right.
okay. All right,
So on line 19, the subdivider shall within 36 months after the last required approval. Is that statute also?
Yep.
3 years is a long time for a
Yeah.
final plat, for God's sakes.
I agree. I agree.
I mean, we have to remember 3 years later. Did they get us that? Where is it? And if,
Yeah, but you gotta remember, it takes them time to engineer, install, and pay for the improvements.
oh, I have.
Page 15?
Line 8, 60 days. For the village board.
Statute. Page 16? Page 17. You'll notice on page 17, I added in stuff where I'm asking, for example, on second column, line 54. I added that I'm asking them to identify wetlands, sinkholes, archaeological features of significance. We haven't done that in the past, and those are things I think we should be paying attention to. I've also put on parent 3 at UCF, or I'm sorry, line 60 there, where I'm wanting them to identify trails, sidewalks. Line 67, I want them to identify other things, whether they're developed or not. So I'm just trying to make it more comprehensive.
So that's if they're aware of it, they have to identify it. They don't have to go and scour the property for it.
Right, but you know, they would, yeah, their engineer would know, their engineer would look.
Sure.
So, but yes. Page 18. Page 19. I added under page 66. So. Statutes allow for public lands dedication, and we didn't have anything in here, so I put this in here. On line 66, any parkland or other lands dedicated to the village shall be dedicated to the village with final plat approval. Such dedication shall require the owner's certificate and the mortgagee certificate in substantially the same form as required by 236.21. So statutes allow you to do that, and we've never taken advantage of that. So I put that in there. 20. 21. 22. On page 22, line 60, I added that we will have the ability to do park assessments or parkland assessments, to assess for park. Page 23.
On line 10, you have zoning administrator in there, yeah.
Line 10.
Oh, he's, yeah, page 22.
Okay.
Okay, page 23. Page 24. And again, you'll keep seeing that I've changed certificate of occupancy to certificate of compliance, because that's what we do at our level. Then we're on page 25. So I'm going to draw your attention to the table. So we're looking at different roads here, and one of the issues we've had is, you know, we're going back, we're putting in sidewalks, we're putting in streetlights on these roads that probably should have had them before. And it would have been nice to have that developer have had paid for that, but now we're paying for it. So what this is saying is, you know, if you're in an R2 zone and you're putting in an urban road, we're going to require streetlights on.
Well, we could always special assess.
We could, but then when you special assess, we have to go through and do that assessment, and it costs us money to do that. Even though we can get it back, it's easier to just say up front. Developer, you got-
But I'm saying for all those that we
Yes.
can't, we can special assess. We haven't special assessed in a while. I mean, we didn't even do the downtown sewer and water.
So I didn't know if there were any objections to how I picked and chose that, but that was based on what I thought was the correct way to do it. Was to say that R2, the developer should pay for it. R3,
I have a question on this, is something I've wondered in my own neighborhood, especially since Shirley Adams left and she no longer needs that street light there. If none of us want a street light in the neighborhood, does it have to stay there forever? Or can I get the neighbors to all agree upon not having a street light.
It depends, if you're, so let's take, for example, the development right up the road. They put that street light in, that, I wanna say it's Pheasant Park, or maybe it's the adjacent development. It's part of their property and they put it in, if they all agree to take it down, they can take it down. If that's in our right of way and we put it up, you can't touch it, because we're looking at not so much what the people next door think, we're looking at safety. The entire stretch, people coming and going down there.
I guess I'm,
So the mom and child who came from 2 blocks away, they may really want that street light. We gotta look at the public as a whole.
yeah, I
would be
mean,
my concern.
on a cul-de-sac. You know, I get what you're saying, but like who else is on there? I guess it's just an implication of making streetlights there, I mean. That's probably not a discussion for this area. Which is something in general that seemed pertinent.
Which reminds me, but can we put something on the parks agenda?
You probably want a petition to have that changed. Park agenda.
Lighting or crosswalks in the B1 district better, which may not be. You cannot see at night. Our lighting is downlit, it's not bright enough in those intersections out there.
Let me send you a picture of some crosswalks in Washington DC that are inadvertently lit up like crazy.
Mill Road will be improved, that's a big one, that one's improved. I mean, but, okay,
Did Parks agree to put in the yellow signs?
it's being discussed again this coming month. They started discussing it last one. Then they talked about different types, so they're revisiting them.
And we also wanted, I couldn't remember exactly what the fire chief said too. So we needed to,
We
Yeah.
were walking around in Egg Harbor this weekend. I was gonna bring them home with me, but my wife wouldn't let me, so
They're in every other town and village.
I know. And people stop.
So, page 26, adding in the sidewalk language we just discussed for a couple months. I will change the waiver language in there throughout this document.
Okay.
Page 27. 28. Page 30. Oh, I just added fiber optic to update it on page 30, line 50, throughout here, you'll see me, and on the next page, you'll see me throwing in the word fiber optic. When this code was written, there was no such thing, so it's just updating.
There was existing, there's just no getting.
Yeah. Page 31, I added language that says all streetlights shall meet dark sky initiatives. Is that something we want to keep in there?
yes,
Yes,
Okay, and then on line, well, everybody? Yeah.
Yes,
And then on line 74 to 77. I added in there that we may require street signs to be designed in accordance with ARP age-friendly recommended design guidelines. Are we okay with that?
don't know what that means.
I do. AARP?
No, I know what ARP is.
Yeah.
You're lucky you.
I don't. No, I could apply here, I'm 60, come on. I'm not a member. But I don't know what it means, what are their design guidelines and policies, I don't know.
Those
that.
are those flashing signs that beep.
No, they actually have a whole, you should,
If that's it, absolutely
no,
not.
no, you should go on their website. They have amazing toolkits and stuff for aging communities and ideas and things like that. So this is just saying we may require it. We don't. But we,
I think we should review what that means before we put it in a code. I'm not saying we want to or don't want to, but I think we
Right.
should know what it is.
okay, so that's your second piece of homework. Everybody go on the ARP website.
Can you
Okay.
send us a link to make sure that we're not just to do that?
Sure.
correct, thank you.
Okay, and then I put in here that the trees have to be planted at a rate of 1 tree per 40 lineal feet parallel to all roads, and I'll tell you why. In the zoning code, we require that you have to have a house every 40 feet along the road. So that's when you're building it, but how nice would it be if when the subdivision was put out there, it actually had all those trees out there? So there's no reason why we're letting, in my opinion, bare subdivisions be created without having tree requirements on.
Right, we did it for the code.
Okay,
There, I know that there was a discussion plan years ago, and Rob and I were talking about it. We independently came upon the same information, talking about how the genders of trees impact pollen in the area around there. I think that there's I think that there was more of the bale trees that have been put up there because they have less fruit that falls off, but it also has an inadvertent side effect of having an enormous amount of pollen in the air, which does a lot to aggravate people's allergies. I think that's something that might be worth putting in the code. I should try and, I know that there was a link that we sent back and forth.
okay, I'll dig into that. Page 32. Just requiring easements for parkland, I'm sorry, page. Line 25 to 29, requiring easements for bike and ped. Page 35.
So the language, I just wrote myself a note that one of the things we have talked about for a while now is we want pedestrian and bike paths if we don't have sidewalks. Should we somewhere in street design talk about that? I
Well,
didn't see it in here, but are we, if somebody puts in a new subdivision, should we be, I mean, does some of the incentives cover that, or should we just say that we want it?
so you mean as far as sidewalks? Right?
Pedestrian or bike access, doesn't have to be a sidewalk.
Access, you mean like a ramp up onto the
No,
sidewalk?
okay, let's, maybe I shouldn't have said pedestrian, a bike path at least. So like what we found here, like when they did Woodcrest, unfortunately, they didn't make it wide enough for a proper bike path. If somebody builds, and this is not even cluster now, if somebody's gonna put in a new subdivision, should their road be wide enough for a bike path? Or do we go as far as doing what Egg Harbor did on the back road? And that, whatever is it, Churchwood, whatever the back street is there, that is proper, that it has pedestrian, it has bike, and it has pedestrian, I mean, and vehicle.
We could put it in here. I think the other thing is we can require that when we're reviewing these plats. Or even new road designs that goes to a different committee. We could be requiring that.
Could we make a general statement in here so we point them in the right direction, so when they come to us, it's in there? And I get, David, I caution that saying wide roads solve that issue, because they really don't. A lot of the time, and when, I mean, I'm saying great for bicycle access, but when you make the roads wider, one, you have to build the additional road
Got
at
it.
highway spec. Two, if it's the term that's used for bike lanes like that is painted bicycle gutters. I don't feel that strongly about them, but there are some people out there in the community that feel very negatively about them. So if we can ask them to put that. Now, I think that asking them to put that path there is a good thing. Let's be not specific about it. I think something else we were talking about last month was depends on the road. Because like when I think of Birchwood, it's a narrow road that's going very slow.
Good
That's
point.
very comfortable on.
Okay, good point.
Believe it, Dave?
Leave it alone.
Page 36. And this goes to the thing where it says, widths may be adjusted by the plan commission upon referral from village parks, property and streets committee. If deemed necessary to conserve land, preserve green space and minimize excess impervious surface. So it's kind of the opposite of what you were just saying there, Dave. Maybe I should add bike lanes in there or bike accommodations.
Bike access? That work for you, Dave?
Mhm.
All right.
So now we're getting onto page 37, okay? And we have talked about, at some point, about 2 homes on the lot.
37.
I'm sorry, page 37, line 6.
Okay, for some reason I haven't scrolled down far enough. I was still on 35.
Yeah, so page 37, line 6. I'm making a provision for it in there. Yep. Oh, we got it back. Which one?
36.
Okay.
Width. Is this what you were just talking about?
Yep.
I just had it highlighted.
I wonder, I mean, I wonder about those widths, so it seems pretty wide. No, that's talking about the right of way, not the surface, correct?
Right, right.
So if we have thinking about a cul-de-sac, if you have a 60-foot right of way, what does that actually mean for the surface? Is that gonna be a 22-foot road? Because I think that would be appropriate.
You know, side note. We need to look at our engineering design manual, because this is consistent with that. Our engineering design manual is really out of date. It was done in 2008, I think. And that needs to be updated, and it's a major undertaking. But we should do that, because we're finding, so like, this stuff reflects what's in that design manual, some of this stuff, but the design manual, like. On sidewalks, for example, there's all these new ADA requirements that you have to put into a sidewalk, and they don't show up in our design manual. So.
And we reference that all the
All
time.
the time, especially in here. So I think that has to be, that's a. Parks and streets thing, that there's so much crossover between the two, but that's a parks and streets thing where the parks committee is gonna,
No,
no? It
No.
didn't start there?
no. Parks is not gonna deal with that. This committee is going to deal with this.
Okay. And I'm okay with that.
Okay,
I'm okay with that, but it's on streets, right? Street design is what they're, and culverts. And sewer laterals and stuff that a different committee would typically address, but we
but
can
not
bring
this
that.
one.
Yeah, we can bring it here because there's such a tie to this code is how, what we can do. I'm gonna get a bid on updating that design manual. So we can look at that because it's not right. Okay, if you're okay with that.
I mean, like, some of that is dictated by an engineer, some of that is dictated by the village, is it not?
It's all engineering. It's all engineering.
So it's not something
We don't really have, we don't have any say over, I mean. We could tell them not to follow this engineer guideline, but why would we, right?
yeah, I think there's plenty of times where we shouldn't follow engineering guidelines because they've kind of led us astray over the years. If it's legal ones, if it's ADA, yeah, we need to follow that.
But you know, Nate. I'm gonna do. The other side of that, this coin. Who on this committee is an engineer that knows better than the engineer? Like, how do you know the ramifications of saying a smaller culvert here? How do you know that's not gonna create flooding over here? We don't know that, but an engineer would. And that's a slippery slope when we start not, I think it's a slippery slope when you start not following your design.
I guess where I would say is like, if we're talking about street widths, yeah, something like there that is clearly has some real merit. I mean, some of the, as much as we want to think that these engineers know all this stuff. There's plenty of stuff that civil engineers had to pull out of thin air in the 1930s.
You're absolutely right, Nate. Stuff like the width, I think you can play with. But most of the engineering stuff we wouldn't want to touch, but yeah, the width, I mean. Back in the day. Wider roads were the ideal, right? Make it wide, let them zip through town and. You had more concrete, and the result was consume land, you have more concrete, you have more water flowing down it. Going into your sewers, carrying garbage, I mean, it was a terrible idea. Why did we ever think of that?
And there were
But
less
that's what we
cars.
did. But that's what we did, right?
Well, because I'm sure there was some lobbyists somewhere from the concrete and asphalt companies saying that
General-
wider is better.
General Motors. Yes.
GM,
For many years, you could not build a house in the greater Milwaukee area without a cement block foundation because the cement block lobby kept all those concrete poulders out of it. And you had to buy cinder blocks.
Okay, I incorporated the widths that we had from a couple months ago on page 36, line 26 through 33. We talked about how wide private roads should be, etc. So that was incorporated in here. I talk about, you started seeing me say on these cul-de-sacs that the plan commission can alter the design or adjust the design.
Something I'd like to put in there for cul-de-sacs. I think that we should make cul-de-sacs pedestrian and cycling faster, make them pervious to that. So that when you have it, what ends up happening is you have alternate paths that aren't cars, you remove conflict from pedestrians and that. So you'd be able to walk through the cul-de-sac, it would connect to the next street over, the next path over, but would not have cars going through it. So it's maintain the cul-de-sac in terms of traffic, but it would actually incentivize people to not get in the car and drive. Because it might be a 2-minute walk there, or it might be a 10-minute drive.
So you're talking
interesting.
about at the top of the cul-de-sac, there's like a sidewalk connected to the bottom of the other cul-de-sac.
Yeah, put bollards there so vehicles can't go through.
All right. Okay, so then on page 37, line 5, we start making provisions for second dwellings, okay? If a second dwelling is allowed on the lot, we're not saying it is, but if it is, zoning permit shall not be issued. Unless all public improvements have been installed, I think is what it says here.
I don't know why. Why wouldn't there be a zoning permit if it's allowed?
The second dwelling is allowed on the lot. The zoning permit shall not be issued for a second residential lot to be developed
Across the street.
from the principal building.
Why is it referencing across the
Okay.
street?
So let's read how it said it. It said, this is what it said. A zoning permit shall not be issued for a second residential principal building which is proposed to be built across the street. So it said, a zoning permit shall not be issued for a second lot across the street. And this is saying, if a second dwelling is allowed on the lot. And then whatever it said.
I don't understand.
I don't understand
I
it.
think that, oh,
I highlighted it and wrote a big question mark because I couldn't figure out what the intent was here.
Oh,
I couldn't
These are
even
the strong-
figure out what it originally was meaning to say.
I think that
Can it go away?
Yeah, I mean, a second unit.
across the street.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be on the same lot.
You know what I think that's saying, I have to think about this, but maybe it's talking about, sometimes you have a lot. Divided by a road, the road bisects it.
Mhm.
I don't know, let me look at it. Cut it out, you know, I'm just trying to work with what was in there, so, but maybe it's better off just to be gone.
Well, how would you take it out unless you?
Yeah.
Let me think
Fine.
about
Unless you could, right, explain it to us that we'll all
Yeah, I
understand.
gotta think about it a little more, okay? Do we have the figures in here? No, no. Because I was gonna say, it says as depicted in figure 3 of the appendix, that might help answer the question. We'll go back and revisit that, okay?
Oh. Illustrations,
Yeah, do you have a figure
3,
3?
I venture to bet I do. Illustration. Number 3, a typical park landscape island, I don't think that applies.
No,
Number 3,
installed. It says whichever is less provided that temporary house.
motion clearance.
But that's talking about a temporary cul-de-sac, so does number 3 show us it's cul-de-sac?
All right, well, let's revisit that one. I'm gonna make a note, we'll revisit. that. Okay,
Double frontage or through lot,
no. We'll go back to that one.
Okay.
Okay. 37. Oh, we're on 37. 38.
um. Okay, back on 37, I'm sorry, we're talking about street trees again on line 88.
Yeah.
And, and they have to be planted within 1 year of plat approval. Is that the final approval that we have to wait 36 months for, or what? What plat approval is that referencing?
Good point. I think it should be before final approval, before final plat. Make sure they're
I mean,
installed.
they shouldn't have they shouldn't get a certificate of compliance until those trees are planted.
Yeah. Yeah, you saw my violation, was I chased a lot of trees.
It was good. So you were on 38?
38?
What is line 74, code HY 33?
Oh,
I
so-
tried
so
to look,
that's-
look it up and I don't know that I could find anything.
I did find that,
Okay,
it's crazy, you know, so I found this, it's a highway code. And, I was like, wow, we're in violation of that. For example, there's like some really big setbacks if you're along the if you have a plat and it's along the highway, they dictate trees, they dictate really great setbacks, which we have not been enforcing. Like I'll use Peach Barn as an example. That setback would have been back so much further. But the problem is, this is a platting code, right? So this is saying,
if it was all open space.
if it was all open
Right.
space, it's saying that if you do a plat on a highway, it's got these really greater setbacks than what the code says, which I didn't realize were out there. Because the code, we say you have to be so far from the right of way. However, if there's a new plat on the highway. It's gonna have to include greater setbacks than normal. Because of code HY 33, which is a DOT code.
We hit this. At the corner, no 42. Then I remember Zeke had to go talk to the Department of Administration to make it so we didn't have to have it. They go 120 feet from the
It's
center.
pretty big, yeah.
Right, that, I think we have that in B1, 120 feet.
No, it's, if you get a chance, look it up. I didn't repeat it here because I think. And I think I mentioned it someplace else, but it was quite interesting and I wanted to make sure it was in here. So people were aware of it, so we weren't in violation of it. And getting in trouble with the DOT. Oh, it's down here at the bottom too. You'll see. On like page 38, line 109 talks about it as well. Okay,
They take our highway away.
nah, but no, but you know what they could, I could see them. Like we approve something wrong, and the guy goes, develops it, starts developing. DOT comes by and tells the guy, you're wrong, and he's like, yeah, but the village told me, too bad, it's your property, government is exempt from errors, right? And then that recipient or the property owner is penalized or has to remove something when we screwed up and should have never approved it, or we should have told them about it. So that could happen. I would hope not. Okay, page 39.
Lines 7 through 10, I have circled.
Again, that's for that highway thing. So it's to make it very clear, it's to call out and make the reader aware. That there's a greater setback. So what this is saying is, if a lot is approved under this chapter, said setback herein shall be applicable and supersede any setback requirement in chapter 66. So in this particular section, people have to understand that code highway 33
Okay,
is going to supersede the zoning code.
Got that brought up. Do you guys want to see it? The administrative code.
If it's like one line, just Janelle read it.
oh, she's got pages.
Pages and pages.
No.
Okay. But it captured land subdivision plats abutting state trunk highways.
And so how, it's 120 foot setback?
No, I don't remember what it is.
I think it's at 110 here. It was something ridiculous though.
I think it's like
Oh.
something like 70. I don't remember.
Yeah, because I was way off on B1. B1 is only 45 feet from the center line. The street right away.
This is what it says right here. All lots adjacent to state highway shall be platted with additional depth necessary. Provide for a building setback line not less than 50 feet from the nearer right of way line. Or 110 feet from the center line, whichever is more restricted.
Oh, we just approved Beacon.
However. This is under platting,
Oh,
so
it was a
that's,
single lot.
yep,
Okay.
all right, page 39. Okay, page 43.
Yes. Line 53 through 57.
I actually have that highlighted. So. So this is land dedication, Payment in lieu of dedication. For all residential developments, a fee of $5,000 per lot shall be paid for each new dwelling unit or lot. And two things why I highlighted that is, we usually don't like putting that in the number actually in the code. But I did.
What made you throw caution to the wind and put the.
But
dollar amount?
because you know what I was thinking, I'm like, I'd rather get it in here rather than, I'll be honest with you. Than wrestle with the board to get it in a fee schedule. I thought, but. I'd rather get it adopted in here and then change the fee schedule later. And when they complain, I can be like, well, it's already in the code.
So this 5,000 is going toward the affordable housing, our county,
It goes towards, parks,
goes towards parks.
yeah. Yeah, because it's park and public land dedication. So it's saying, you can put in some parks, and if you're not gonna do that, then you can dedicate land, and if you're not gonna do that, then you give us amount per lot that we will put towards land dedication or parks.
So it's not just parks, but it's parks or pedestrian or bike.
Yeah.
Bike paths. Okay.
Yep.
I understand why you put it in there, I guess. Is 5,000 enough? Or is 5,000 too much?
Well, you know why I did 5,000, and we can change that. I highlighted it in bright yellow so for discussion, but we also have. We have another fee that is 5,000 per dwelling unit. I think. We do. Sorry.
I mean,
No, I don't like that at all,
You don't,
because. A park, if you don't get the park right away, you're never gonna get it. That $5,000, I mean. With all the building that's gone up on the top of the hill, where is there a park on the top of the hill?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
well,
point to me.
no, shut up, Julie.
Karpinski, yeah, but the county-
Right, Horbinsky's lot was supposed to be the one that Mr. Cox purchased from Zeke, when Zeke was here. That was supposed to be green space up there for that development.
Yes, there was, there were a couple of spots up there that were supposed to be green space, and they're not anymore.
Right,
So what happens to that?
Bad decisions on the village's part. They should have
Yeah.
had deed restrictions on it. They should have had retainers and bonds and things of that nature to make
Well-
that happen.
So with this $5,000, I would just as soon see a park or
But
a
you-
green space or something deeded right in.
But
And-
here's the problem, Ron. By statute, we can only require money for a park if that park is in our outdoor rec. So if that park does not set us, if our outdoor rec plan doesn't specifically call for a park here,
On this particular parcel, okay.
yep, then, or in this quadrant, let's say it's, the outdoor rec plan says there should be a community park at the corner of Ava Hope and Northwoods, okay?
Just a bone of contention with me.
Which
I'm not against parks, I'm against this particular parcel being used for a park.
Which I keep nagging her.
I'll have a park up there no matter where it's at.
Yeah, so you know, if it's called out in an outdoor rec plan, you can have them. Give you money for that park, you can make them develop that park. But if it's not called out in that plan, you can't do it. This is the only other way you're gonna be able to get money from that.
But then it's on the village to put that money in a proper place, because I know as other municipalities talked about payment in lieu of parking, they were collecting these fees, but then the money went to something else and then.
Oh, we've never collected
There
any
were other,
fees.
well, other communities that,
Oh.
right, no, I know that.
We collected, we're gonna give it to Tasha and have it put it all on red.
Yeah, what,
Double it.
you know. I hope we're to the point where we're a little more diligent on some of that. But I have to be honest with you, let's face it, you could get a new board who's like. Maybe they're anti-parkland and they're like, no, take all the money out of the park fund and. You know, so that's why you almost want to make sure, you have to make sure it's in a legal binding document. To make sure somebody can't just pull it out and spend it. on
Until
something
that
else.
legal binding document is in the back of a file cabinet somewhere and it's long been forgotten about, right?
Or another administrator throws it out.
That happened here on?
When did that happen?
So, and that comes back to the question of, is that the right amount of money? Because I think to your point, Ron, we want that number to be bigger than, to make it less appealing to put money in there versus dedicating
Right,
usage.
yeah.
Keep in mind, it's $5,000 per lot.
Well,
If you're doing a 20 lot subdivision, that's a big chunk of change. That's more than we'd spend on a park. Maybe not.
Well, not if we had to buy land.
That's right.
Yeah, there
Let's
really,
throw in
you know, when
term.
you're talking, you could buy a little lot for 100,000. I mean, that really isn't that much.
10,000?
Very
10, 10, 10,
Yeah.
15, 15,
I
whatever.
think that what our stated goal then should be to compel people to
Right,
have that, let's give them two choices. Let's just make this choice less appealing.
sure.
10,000. Okay, and you know what? So let's talk about this though. And I just thought of this should probably be waived if you're doing a cluster development because you're already preserving the land, doing the trail, etc. Let me think about that part of it.
Let's see if there's any other circumstances we would want to waive it.
Okay, let me think about that and bring that back. Page 45.
I have nothing throughout the rest of the document. I don't know if anybody else. Does.
Anybody else? Before I go keep going.
No,
Let me look.
Why doesn't Ron have a surface?
He doesn't like it.
Oh,
Well, and the rest is all pretty. So just bringing your attention in the definitions, I added under PUD. PUD shall appear on the official zoning map for Sister Bay as an overlay district. Make it very clear, so we start doing that. And
because we found out through the Goki thing, right? That it
Yeah,
wasn't on
we
the
have
map.
not been doing that on any of them. None of them are overlays. And then just real quick on page 61 is map and text amendments. I think we should just delete that altogether since it has not been kept up. Okay, so that's all I have on land division. That's it, just a little bit.
Any other comments on that before we move on?
Julie, the one question I had, you're gonna take and platting out of the title?
Yeah, because it shows up. Janelle, in different areas, like, if you look at this, it's called the Vision Land Division Code. In different areas, it's called Vision Land Division Code, but on the cover, it was Land Division and Platting Code. So it's just making it consistent.
Okay, I just wanted to know for when I have to. review
Yeah.
it all. So
Yeah,
it should just be land division code.
yeah, unless we see some other areas that should be changed. If you see some, Janelle, let me know.
Okay,
Okay, 7D, review draft amendments to telecommunications tower regulations.
Oh,
okay, so now what do you want the minutes to say? You're gonna come back, Julie's gonna revise it, and you're gonna come back
Yeah,
next month and review it again?
yep.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I'm still on June's packet.
Well, that's where all my notes were.
I thought, okay, what's going on here?
Not much changed in the telecommunications thing other than, so Janelle went through and checked it all for consistency, to make sure the numbers matched up and everything. I added a little bit in blue, and then I threw in some ideas in the staff report regarding disguising it just for discussion. I didn't have time to, other than Janelle going through and changing that and me doing the research on the disguising it, I didn't do much to it.
So
So
I'm trying to, go ahead.
on page 87. Where it talks about, right in the first paragraph, all landscaping shall be properly maintained to ensure good health and viability at the operator's expense. I mean, how do we make sure that that's an ongoing thing? Where do we have teeth that, okay, it looks great the first, couple of years, and now all of a sudden. No one's paying any attention, and what kind of recourse then do we have?
So I have this right now with a guy whose landscaping died. And I told him he had to replant it. I told him he had to maintain it. And with this particular case, there was more involved, and Randy actually filed a lis pendens against the guy, and that's one of the things is that he didn't maintain what was planted. So if he wasn't gonna maintain it, we would have to take enforcement action.
Who do we force to maintain it? Is it the operator of the equipment or the owner of the tower?
It would be, we would want to make sure that. And again, this part's not final, these are just ideas, but I would say the applicant or the owner of the tower.
There's no great way to deal with that, because you're talking about one large company, talking to another large company. And you might ask for something to happen. For both sides of it, you could ask for something to happen, it can take forever. To deal with that. To have some action taken. So I don't know that there's the right one to have on there or not. I mean, ultimately, the tower owner is probably the one we have more. We can hold more culpable, but then, let's just say we've got a tower owner that has a 30-year lease. For the tower to another company, another larger company, which is exactly what we have. We've got an Insight Tower Company owns the Olympus Tower. However, Vertical Bridge manages that assets on a 30-year lease.
Owner is always responsible. So let's say you have a renter and he's throwing couches out the door and garbage. I can't go after the renter, I go after the owner. The owner is always liable for his own property, responsible for his property. So in that case, I'm just looking at this, I would go after the owner.
The owner of the tower. Just keep in mind, the stuff that we've seen come here has been by like the cellular carriers. Like we've seen AT&T come here, we've seen Sprint come here when they do their applications.
We can make it very clear it's the landowner.
Well, that could be different together.
Well, I'm just saying, how
Well,
do you
this-
enforce it?
And I'm saying there's
Yeah.
challenges there, I don't have an answer to it, but I'm just illustrating more some of this.
Well, and that's what I was thinking with my question. Are we even gonna get anybody on a phone? Let alone, how do we make
Well-
them do something?
Yeah.
I think we have to figure out who's responsible, but leave it in there because it's not fair if he's required to put up, let's say, 20 trees, they all die. And then we all have to live with that. It's only fair that he fulfills his obligation to make sure. those trees
Escrow.
grow.
Can we do that for existing structures?
No, but this wouldn't apply to the existing ones. Unless they're adding on to it.
You know,
They have to give us
Well-
landscaping escrow money.
define adding on to it. If I'm going up there and I'm changing out the antennas, but I'm not changing anything at base.
I have to look at the whole code to see if. We would even regulate that. If we regulate it, if we would require a permit, yeah. Right, change of use, change of ownership, if that's something we regulate, then at that point, like everything else, once you change.
I think it would be a change of footprint on the ground, because ultimately you're gonna change stuff on the tower all the time. You may be mandated, I mean, like, there's an impending mandate to change your equipment on the tower because of the narrow band. That's going to impact, I think they still have equipment on that tower, public safety does. So that, I don't think we want that to come from the planning commission, but if it's changing the footprint on the ground for the landscaping portion of it, that would make sense.
Yeah. So with these,
So did you write down escrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
like I said, I didn't have time to put this into code format, into the code that followed, but if this is what we like, this type of thing, then we will. Do we want to require them to be disguised as trees
So
or other?
do you know how ridiculous a 195-foot tall tree looks? It is absurd. It really what happens with those, like if you think
Who
of
has
those,
the 190? Is Tower Storage, are those 190? What are
the ones that are northbound,
yeah,
those are between 300 and 500.
oh,
So if you got a flashing light, it's over 200 feet tall.
oh, okay, thank you.
At night, it'll have a flashing light. The there's a very common height of 195 because you don't have illumination. And we're not on any flight paths that are gonna keep you from doing that, because if you're around the ball, there's a big swath, you can't put a larger tower up because of that. Making somebody disguise it. I think that if you look at Bailey's Harbor as an example, you're looking at a small tower that's probably 80 feet tall. And it blends in after a while. I mean, like, if you look at it, it does not look like a tower.
Right.
It doesn't look like a tree, it looks like a tower, but most people, when they look out of the corner of their eye, they don't see it. Once you get to a certain height, like, if it's 120 feet, it's gonna look goofy.
So then we probably have to have that old 3/4 waiver. Because I mean, there are exceptions, I agree, we're probably not gonna wanna make a 200-foot tower, God forbid we ever have one, look like a tree.
What's, as I was reading this, I was thinking about the camouflage. Is that if I were to put $5 on a bet, there's gonna be a tower within 100 feet of here someday. That if somebody's gonna put a tower in, that's gonna be right back here,
Well, we've already talked about that,
okay?
Yeah.
What do you all wanna see when you're walking down our beautiful lakefront and you look this way? You wanna see that thing?
No.
In fact, I just noticed the other day as I was driving through Jacksonport, there's a new tower south of the city, and it's just kind of popping up. Now, it's far enough away, but I think we should think very seriously about, we want a tower here. Do you want to see it from?
So what I,
But you can talk about that. What is that thing that architects or developers talk about? Where, if you're standing on the street, so if you were standing on Bay Shore and you were looking this way, would you even see it? What is, there's a
say,
line of sight,
Line of sight.
yeah, so,
is that what it is?
yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna.
I don't know that, would we actually see it?
So I've had conversations with people about tower going here, just very rough conversations, say, what would it look like? Just to try and get some information. The people are going to, the thing we can do to minimize the impact the most. Is keep the height down. Keep it so, I mean, like, the goal of this tower here, I mean, talking to people like, oh, well, they put 195, they're like, absolutely not. That's not gonna fly. Well, why not? It just won't. Like, well, I don't understand why not. This is a moot point. Let's stop this conversation because it's not gonna happen. I think that you'd have less of an impact having a 90-foot monopole, meaning like a tower that's painted blue. If it's over here, you're barely gonna see elsewhere. Versus if you have a much taller one that's camouflaged, I think managing the height is gonna be more important than anything. And ultimately, we can't manage the height. We can't say, no, you can't put a tower up that's 195 feet tall.
Why can't we?
State of Wisconsin won't allow us to do it.
Oh, yeah, that was one of my notes, what are state and local laws? Okay, so
But the benefit of having it be here is we can meet whatever sort of requirements we want. I mean, if it's on our property. But I think that to your point, it's gonna be the height that matters for visibility. Camouflaging is only gonna do some of it. And I think in actually some ways, if it's taller than the tree line, you're actually gonna have more stuff you're gonna see than just some sleek antennas.
Correct. Right. So I had a question on page 88. Line 35. Unless exempted by 2B, no, it's what's in blue. A wireless telecommunications facility in the right of way on public or private property or modifying existing. It sounds to me that it's only in the right of way on public or private property. Is it an and or is my question?
So the way it's written right now, when I was reading this, I was really surprised. It was only talking about stuff in the right of way.
Right.
And I was like, no, our intention is on land, in land, right? I mean, we're not just looking at the right of way, is that correct?
Well, but when this came to us, when Bo was here, maybe it was even before Bo got, I mean, we've been sitting on this for, there was
Mobility, something like that. The company that wanted to put up the 100-foot
right,
utility.
right,
It was a utility pole. It was a tower. They just call it utility.
yeah.
And that was right after we got, I think that was deep, because it was right after we, like a year after we got done burying.
Right,
Then I think this should be flipped. I think it should talk about public or private property, including right of way or something to that effect. I
well,
mean,
I just thought and or, I mean, to encompass all of them, the way that I read it, it only sounded like one, not the other or all.
we need to make that clear then, because like I
Okay.
said, when I was reading it, I'm like, they're only trying to regulate the right of way. I don't like that.
And at that time, we were,
But now we do
Right.
want to do everything.
right. I mean, I think that looks like the only question I had. Throughout the whole thing.
So if nobody has anything else, then what we'll do is add this language about camouflaging, assuming we want that we want camouflage or have that option.
I really don't think we want to put that camouflage in that. I don't think that that requirement is. If it's so high, I mean, like, I can not need a waiver and I can put up a really dumb looking tower.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's a waiver in their need, because let's say you're in a residential subdivision, somebody puts up a 50-foot tower, 75-foot tower. If it were next door to me, I'd want it disguised as a tree or a church steeple or whatever it is. I mean, in a residential subdivision, do you really want to be looking at a tower on the next lot?
Well,
I don't think most people
But
would.
they also, again, line of sight. Would you be looking at it when it has to be however tall it is, and it's gotta have that,
The false one.
yeah, the fall zone. Which is even bigger, and then the height of the tower, but you said they never fall from the base, they break in the middle if they break. So they're already that far off the property line, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you, so. You take it would.
So
you're going-
would you actually see it if it's a 100-foot tower and it's 120 feet off the property line?
I think if you
You're gonna have to stand back so far and look at your own house to see the tower, right?
Mhm.
If you Google, I think it's, don't quote me on this, Larson Camouflage, which was now sold out to a different company. They give you all these samples of camouflage projects they do. And different trees, and they're like the leader in camouflage. And they show a bunch of scenarios, and it's, what I thought was interesting is, it's stuff I wouldn't have even thought of, like maybe the tower's at the corner of a parking lot. So all the people going in that parking lot see it, so I think we have to look at camouflage. Is that the right one, Denise? Do I have the right name?
Yep. cactus, trees,
Palm trees are very.
water tower.
George steeple, I mean, they're pretty creative, so I think we have to. I would rather see us put it in there and have a waiver ability than to say not required at all. Cause then if we are in that situation, then we have no way of
So,
deciding.
Yeah, I would think it'd be a good idea to leave it in. And,
And have the
and
waiver.
at least you have it there in case you want it.
so what that will probably do, and this is okay, it probably, that's gonna generally camouflaging a tower drive would cost about 3 times.
It adds about 100,000, Larson Camouflage said it adds about 100,000 to a large tower.
It's going to deter somebody from taking a tower. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I think realistically, I believe. Nobody really wants to put a tower here, and that's a problem for us. I think that actually the community would benefit from having a tower.
So we can waive it too.
Sure,
Well, let's have it, everything redone and we can think about. Because I agree, something that's 195 feet tall camouflaging is just gonna make it stand out even more.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe it's 100 and less.
We can make it something unique and charge money to look at.
a viewing platform.
Fish,
So,
a lighthouse. Okay, so that we're gonna revisit, so.
Okay. So item number 8, small towns initiative update by Mr. Bell.
So it was at the end of May that I went up to Charlotte, North Carolina, and went to this Strong Town National Gathering. It was the first one they did. This is an organization that's founded by a gentleman that refers to himself as a recovering civil engineer. Nice guy. I actually met him and talked to him for a little bit. There was about 500 people there. Met a lot of people from all over the country, somebody from Brooklyn, some people from California. Actually, somebody from AARP from Madison, Darren, something or other, actually connected with him. And I was surprised that he was there. And I'm like, well, how is AARP here? He's like, well, we're interested in a lot of the same things. I'm like, interesting. I think that Sister Bay was probably on the smaller side of municipalities out that were represented. Something I was surprised by is the number of people that were there just because they were community members that cared. I'd say there's probably 10% of them were elected officials or plan commission members. Most of them,
Everybody else is, wow.
they were just people that cared that much. And they have a big impact on the community. So there was, I'm trying to think, the more interesting people I met were from Florida and Georgia. Talked about, one of the things to talk about is the cost of infrastructure. That's a big thing for small towns. Saying when you spread all this infrastructure, when you get this federally and state subsidized infrastructure, you install it, and then you have to maintain it. It can be a massive burden on the municipality. Sister Bay isn't facing that issue. Something that I realized. So Dave Elliott asked me like, well, how did it go? And I texted him back. I said, we have problems. They're not unique. They all have solutions. None of them are easy. And our particular subset of problems are a little bit unique. But any one of our problems is experienced by other places. So it's interesting there. And as I was talking to people, one of the things that was hardest for them to wrap their mind around. It was right in the middle of the short-term rental. And they said, well, why don't you just regulate it? I said, oh, we can't do that. I'm like, well, I don't understand. Like,
They don't understand our Republican GOP?
no, all I would say is that came under Scott Walker and they said, oh, okay. That was the simplest explanation to make them understand where that framework came from. And these are people from Texas that actually, the one that had the biggest reaction was a guy from Texas. He was just dumbfounded. And he kept on saying, well, why can't you just do this? Like, no, we can't do that. So I did just a lot of talking to a lot of people. And there was 3 sessions that I went to. One was starting with Strong Towns Local Conversation, which I've been doing on a monthly basis. I think the next time I actually have, the Peach Barn lined up, so hopefully I can do it there. So I get a little bit more attendance. I've been doing it at the waterfront park and we've gotten some people there. We're just talking about general things. Nothing in particular. One of the things that we've kind of focused in on is housing, transportation, and to a lesser extent parking, and those three issues all are tied together. So that was the first one I went to. The next one was parking reform. And that was an interesting one. Actually, the woman that was at that event was from Chicago. She'd actually been to Door County. People don't know Sister Bay out in the world. They do know Door County. Except for one gentleman I met on the rapid transit, and I told this to Bjorn last week. Said I was on there and had a name tag on. I said, "You're from Sister Bay." Is that in Door County? I said, "Yeah, it is." They got a place with the goats on the roof. That is us. So anyway, the parking reform stuff, I'm big on parking reform. I also realize there's a couple things that we have to get in order to make that possible. And some of that is better pedestrian access, some of that is better mass transit or some mass transit access, and some of that is paid parking. Because if we don't do that, you can't just decide to abolish parking minimums without doing some of the framework you need for that. They are very big on abolishing parking requirements, and I think that there's some merit to that. The one I learned the most from, and actually some of these things I've already cited and I that I learned from, is the escaping the housing trap. That was one that talked about what places are doing, what the fundamentally the issue that, as I stated earlier, is at federal level, we are pushing for housing prices to ever go up. Yet we're very concerned when housing prices constantly go up and are no longer affordable. So we're actually working against ourselves in a very real way.
So so you mentioned that before, so how is, and now you're saying it's coming from the federal government, how is that, what's the trickle down here? What is the federal government doing that?
The interest rates is the biggest driving factor on that, and but also like just monetary policy. To make sure that, I mean, if you think about what the federal government's reaction was to the housing bubble bursting. They did a lot of things at macroeconomic levels to drive that housing price back up. The biggest thing they're doing though is monetary policy. And I don't see, I don't even consider that something that I'm gonna try and change. That's just too big of an elephant to eat even one bite at a time. And there's a lot of ramifications that I can't even wrap my head around.
Tax incentives for not selling at an inflated price. That's Julie's solution. Because everybody wants to make money on their house.
Yeah.
But if it's offset.
There's a couple places that are doing some interesting stuff for affordable housing. South Bend, Indiana is a big one. Actually, I sent.
Yep, I have that still open in a tab.
Yeah.
Build South Bend.
Yeah, so I reached out to them. I have not gone a lot deeper in there. Just wanted to have that access to seeing what they're doing. One of the things they do is they have pre-approved houses that you can just go and build. You don't have, it's far simpler. It's a couple models you can do.
Just a note on that, Nate, when I was in Josephine County, we did that with accessory buildings. Because having a garage plan built was so expensive, so we're like, here are 10 plans that have already been approved for UDC requirement and everything, so people could just go in and build them. And then as part of our RFP for the housing planner, we did ask for pre-approved plans to reduce the cost to the developer.
Something else they talked about there, and I brought this up a couple times, and I mean, I even explained, this is where I started talking about STR. I said, well, the planning commission a couple years ago, we've been talking about ADUs. And planning commission was completely on board for it until we realized those ADUs could be STRs, and said, well, why did you put it? I said, because I can't defend that. I'm not for that. That's way too intensive to use. It's one thing to have an ADU that's somebody that's a long-term rental, but when that starts doubling up short-term rentals on a residential lot, that's too much. But they talked about that's 19% of the new housing units that came online in California. Again, I'll say this whenever I mention that stat. We're not California. We don't want to necessarily be California, but that doesn't mean they're not doing something that's worth looking at. So 19% of the new housing units in 2022 were ADUs. Now, California also had to have something I find rather repugnant to do that, and that was action at the state level that was dictated on local municipalities. Where you can't say no to ADUs in the state of California anymore. As much as I like ADUs, I don't like that part of it. So the other thing they talk a lot about is incremental development, especially when it comes to housing, and how I phrase that is. In plate tectonics, if you have two plates that are pushing together and they don't move for a very long time, you get massive forces that build up. And you have a really big earthquake. And what that would mean is if you have a zoning district that stays completely static for a very long time, you're going to have that big quake, and it's going to have radical change at some point, because it's either going to be blighted and need to be redeveloped, or something is going to happen. So they talk a lot about letting that incremental development happen, and realizing that our communities are dynamic, that they do change over time. We shouldn't have that expectation. Things won't change at all over 30-year period.
I'm good with the change that's happened for the next 30 years if nothing else happens. I'm just putting that on the record.
So then in 30 years, if we'll have the change.
Explosion.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really interesting. There's a lot of people out there that care. That's one of the takeaways I got from it. I still keep in touch with some of these folks. Email with them. I'm disappointed I didn't get a spreadsheet from the guys in Duluth, Georgia. They were talking about the cost of delivering services for these 1 and 2 acre lots. Because one of the things they talk about is how these relatively rich suburbs are actually being subsidized by these poor or what you would consider lower income areas, because those places are so densely built. The cost of delivering service is so much lower. It actually generates more revenue for the village, the municipalities, than these places that are spread out.
You know, a place you might want to check out is the American Farmland Trust. They have a lot of models like that. They're just interesting to see what they have out there. See how some of that. It's crazy when you look at the cost of development at the expense of other stuff. So,
So this was the first one that they ever held.
Mhm.
So before it was just online information.
They would do some small gatherings. I mean, they're based in Minnesota. I think they've been around for 10 years or so.
And do they plan on this being an annual thing or,
Yes,
okay,
yeah, there's about 500 people that showed up. And
where is it next year?
they haven't decided where it's gonna be next year, but people are already asking, and I think that it'll be very well attended.
Okay,
me and I both subscribe, I think, you subscribe to all the emails and everything, right? It's something that I think everybody should. I mean, it's got some really interesting data in it, if you have the time to read it.
you have time to check it.
I check the headline. If it's something that I'm interested in, I read it, but yeah, if a person had time to read it, that would be great.
There was
Well, I mean, that's like years ago. On plan commission, when Bob Cufford was here, he got us subscriptions to zoning practice. We got a lot of information out of that. It was awesome. I'm sure they probably don't do the print version anymore. It's probably just all online. But yeah. Things like that have a wealth of information.
Zoning bulletin, zoning practice, those are all awesome, but who's got?
Oh, zoning practice.
There was just a good article talking about Foxconn and the lasting impacts of Foxconn on the local municipalities down there. I thought of Zeke and the fun he must be having.
with that class.
Okay, thanks, Nate.
Mhm.
All right, item number 9, permit report.
So, permits for the first 6 months of the year, as you can see, there were 51 of them. This doesn't include the special event or tent permits, but really heavy on signs, fences, a lot of fences because people are trying to disguise their garbage for their short-term rental. sign permits are.
Really, it's not just regular year-round people who are putting up fences who want to stay the hell away from the short-term rental visitors.
I think most of the fence ones were short-term rental. There are some though where people just wanted to put up a fence. And then, of course. Sandwich board sign permits are, what I found are always heavy in summer because. I go out there and I find all these violations and I can get permits for them. But that's the first 6 months.
And then the violations report, which does not include 35 short-term rental violations.
Yeah, I didn't know if you guys wanted to know about that. I mean, they're really regulated by the board, so I think that's more important for the board. To have that, but. For this purpose, I just went with the zoning violations and the other violations that I'm enforcing. And again, you can see the sign violations that are out here. Garbage violations, but. These are, like I said, these are ones that are not short-term rental violations, so. I think I caught them all.
What is the fine for cutting down a tree? To get permission to cut down a tree?
Do you know that the fine is not that bad?
I think I've heard that.
The zoning citation is not bad at all. It's disheartening, the fee on that. However, I make them. Jump through hoops, because my goal is to get that tree put back.
Yeah, they plant trees to replace the one.
They usually do, a really good example was if you go past Mark Capomaccio, I think it is, on Bay Shore Drive. He built that house, I think maybe 2 years
Oh,
ago.
the White House.
Yeah, that lot was cleared.
And
And
the Burns property?
I don't know by that name, but
Yeah, that might be.
Burns's old house?
I mean, I got trees put back on there,
Okay.
Yeah,
but
because they took
but it was
down 2 or 3 significant trees. And they just now got around to landscaping them.
because I withheld their short-term rental license, I issued them a citation.
So they built that house to be a short-term rental.
It's a short-term rental.
Oh,
Yeah, the house is 22 people.
I issued him a citation and withheld his license until he brought it into compliance. And he got the license on, he got it landscaped like on a Wednesday. We issued the license on Thursday because he was renting it on a Friday. It was a real quick, but that was how I got that one in compliance was the citation and then withholding the license until it was brought into compliance. And I went out there and he didn't do what I had asked, because you can't have an opening wider than so much, and he pushed it, and I went out there and I said, no, you gotta have your landscaper come back, put one more tree in right here to close that gap that the code requires. And then when he finally did, we issued the license. But it's, it's not, there's another one that's under orders. There's one that I was issued. It's conditions on the permit and the trees are done, so I'm gonna have to get on them, but the trees are. Almost every permit I issue, I put a condition about trees. Wouldn't you say, Janelle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Just for the record, I'm a finance background. I can't see how a multi-million-dollar property like that. Is gonna make, I'm assuming he's just trying to defer costs, because unless he's renting it at a really super high price, but. That was an over $1 million property that he tore down. And then that house. Is probably 4,000 square feet, and it's landscaped to beat the band on the lakeside.
I think sometimes people are just trying to offset their mortgage. I don't know.
So someplace I was, there was a lot of brush that was removed, but I don't know if there was any trees removed as well, if that's the full other properties.
Oh, no, he did more than brush.
Have you,
Yeah, I've had
Okay.
a conversation with him.
lucky,
He's gonna be applying for a permit eventually.
Item 11, next regular meeting, August 22nd, 5:30.
And Denise, I just want to share that we are waiting for the DOA to sign the contract on land use and we're ready to go. I just want to give everybody the schedule so you can see what it's gonna look like. The dates aren't on here. Because it depends when that is scheduled, but as soon as it's scheduled, we're ready to have that kickoff. So just the Department of Administration.
For
Um,
what?
Department of Administration oversees Wisconsin coastal management. So we got our grant through Wisconsin Coastal
Oh,
Management,
okay.
and then Wisconsin Department of Administration is the one who has to sign the contract on that grant. And we have all our contracts squared away, but we're waiting for them to sign it. And then we can start the trigger and go. So this is, in talking with Bay Lake, this is kind of how we formulated the schedule. Because we talked about, should there be separate meetings for just housing? Should there be separate ones on economic development? Should there be a separate transportation one? Should there be a separate utilities one? And I said, we are not going to get that many focus groups. It's just not going to happen. Some of these topics, we have to combine topics. Or we're never going to get done and we're never going to have the people to get these done, so. So if you want to just kind of look that over, but that will be, probably working with Denise to get something scheduled in August already for that kickoff.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn at 8:36?
So move.
Motion by Kane,
Second.
second by Schmitz, all in favor, respond with an aye. Aye. Opposed? Thanks, everybody. Good conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad we got through that.